Tell me, crack that budget open. Find
Run
out.
for the wall.
I call this meeting to order. This is a continuation of last night's meeting, May 6th. Commissioner or Councilor Runyon, would you please lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand with me if you're able. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilor Randall,
Present.
Councilor Ring,
Present.
Councilor McLaughlin,
Present.
Councilor Richardson,
Present.
Runyon,
present.
Jen Oldenburg,
Present.
Allison Schock,
Present.
Serena Smith,
Here.
Jared Gosson, Sandy Hickrow.
Here.
And Mayor Mays.
And Mayor Mays is attending another meeting this evening that he was called to do. All right, we need first order of business is to approve the minutes of May 5th. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Councilor Runyon, to approve the minutes of May 5th.
Randall, second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, raise your right hand or say aye.
Aye.
Any and a disapproval? Any abstentions? All right, that is passes. We're going on a continuation of public hearing. City Manager.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I wanted to kick off tonight with is answering a question that the mayor posed late last night. So if I can ask you to turn to page 174. And I'll try and paraphrase for the mayor. He was asking how the contingency is calculated. You'll see that near the bottom on page 174, and whether or not that calculation includes some of the transfers and other payments that we have in alignment with the fiscal policy that we have to maintain a 10% contingency. And so the contingency is calculated without those other uses. So the transfers that we make into the capital fund, the transfers that we make to support the Federal Street Plaza, for example, the transfers to the streets department, the airport, some of the payments that we make to Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, for example, those are all taken out before we calculate that contingency. And so that's how we perform that calculation and land on 1.28 million that you see there, 3 lines up from the bottom on page 174. And just wanted to make sure I took the time to answer that question from last night. And if that's clear, I'm going to pass it over to our library director, Jeff, to present the next fund.
Hello, good evening. I think most of you got our newsletter. So the newsletter is, I'm considering the newsletter an accomplishment. It's much improved from when I started here. And I would have actually brought a Spanish language newsletter, but they're all gone. So those have proven extremely popular. And every month we keep printing more and they keep disappearing. So that's a really good thing. So eventually we'll find the balance point. But right now it seems like we're always short of Spanish newsletters. So a lot of our programming efforts are in the newsletter and some of our author events. So please feel free. Also, I put out some bookmarks. So every summer we have a summer reading program for students. It's very important for students to keep up with their reading over the summer. Otherwise, in the fall, teachers have to rebuild reading levels and skills to get back to where they left off the school year in June. So the summer reading program's extremely popular, and we're going to have a pretty awesome kickoff event in June. And I actually just sent the insurance rider to Betsy, the risk management person for the city. So we're going to have a bounce house and a lot of pretty cool food. So the city manager promised to come and be in the bounce house. So we're kind of looking forward to that. So I'll highlight some of the things going on at the library, and then I'll take questions. So one of the big things we've been talking about for a while is the HVAC capital improvement project at the library. And finally, we're getting pretty close. So we put it out to bid. I talked to the maintenance supervisor. A construction firm from Vancouver was the low bidder. It's $423,000 and $53,000 for the engineer. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be more than that. So we're on track, and we're looking at September, October. So we don't want to do the project this summer when it's really hot out. We want to maintain our air conditioning over the summer. We don't want to go without that for a month or two. So we're going to start the project in September and October. So that's it for the HVAC. Some other projects we have that I've started budgeting for are to replace the elevator, to replace the shingles on the roof. And then well, that's one part of the roof, and then the other part of the roof we're going to replace as well. Whoops, sorry. So I started planning for that and putting money away for that. So for a long time, like we talked about HVAC for quite a while before it got going, we did the same thing with the library van. So this year, the library van is realized. We got the library van in October. If you were at the Cherry Festival parade, you saw it. We call it the Word Wagon. So it kind of takes the history of Wasco County into account, and it's been extremely popular, and it's going all over Wasco County, and a lot of folks way out in the smaller towns really appreciate it. They have access to a lot of technology, hotspots, computers, laptops, and library materials. So it's been great. Another thing we recently got this year is a new self checkout machine, which was working great for about a month. And then our consortium did a software update, and since then it's been very buggy and it's not been working. So the last month or so, we've been working hard on it, and we're getting closer. And that was one of the main functions of Maggie Pando, who, I don't know if some of you might know who Maggie Pando is. She was my longest tenured employee, and today was her last day. So after 35 years, she retired. So we had a little party for her today. So if I'm a little incoherent during this meeting, you know why. Yeah, it was pretty emotional. She was a big part of the library. There's a lot of institutional knowledge in her head, and I still have access to it because I have her phone number. So she'll be missed. We're continuing to get the library van immersed into the service model for the county, and that's going well. Some of you know the two bears in the bear pit. Jeff Stewart made those. Jeff Stewart has very kindly agreed to make two more cubby bears, and he's working on them very diligently. The cubby bears are going to go near one of the posts, near the canopy, near the entrance to the library. So there's going to be two little cubby bears chasing each other up the post. So we're looking forward to getting that from Jeff. Programming's going great. The Day of the Dead program, which a lot of you gave us a lot of positive feedback. We actually held that on Saturday this year, and we had just as many people, like 800 people. The only thing is it lasted a little longer. The year before, we did it after a workday, so the hours were a little compressed, but this year we did it on Saturday, and it was a little more free flowing. It wasn't as crowded, but we still had 800 people, so it was a great event. We got two really nice grants this year. Google gave us $10,000 to buy a privacy booth. So one of the big issues at the library was private study rooms for folks. So Google supported a privacy booth that fits 2 to 6 people. And then we actually got a grant through the state library for a privacy booth that fits 1 to 2 people. So those have been extremely popular. Every day they're getting used. And actually, I use them sometimes when I need some privacy. So they've been really great. I guess one of the things regarding that is the federal government has stopped funding the Institute of for Museum and Library Science. So that grant is no longer available. So they gave us $7,000. So we just got that in the nick of time before they stopped the funding. So that was kind of, we were lucky in that respect. Because that IMLS is not funded anymore, we're losing a lot of databases that our patrons will not have access to. Also, the library, because of IMLS funding, was able to hire a teen intern during the summer, which has been fantastic. We've done it for the last 3 years. That's no longer available as well because of the lack of funding. So that's been one thing we're dealing with. And also because of the lack of funding there, our courier expenses. So we belong to SAGE Consortium. It's the biggest consortium of libraries in the state, roughly 77 libraries. So we all share resources. So the courier system that services all the libraries is going to have, well, it does have financing issues right now. So the consortium is trying to work through that right now, but I'm anticipating my cost to be part of the consortium to go up quite a bit. And that kind of leads me into another thing. That expense is actually not in my city budget. So if you remember last year, the city auditors wanted a lot of stuff taken out of the city budget and put into the county library district budget. Those courier costs will actually come out of my county budget, but they'll still impact all the libraries in the county. If you've been in our children's edition, we have a giant pincushion art piece that kids can interact. That's pretty new as well. And our canopy and library to go, they're both digital. Canopy's video, it's actually getting more and more popular. I don't think we have, if we have any red boxes anymore, but I think they're pretty much disappeared. But a lot of people are able to access free videos. Well, they can get free DVDs from the library, but they can actually download or watch free video from Canopy as well. And we also have free digital books and audiobooks from Libby, which you can download 24/7. Those are extremely popular as well. So I already talked about IMLS and the lack of funding there in the county versus city. So there were a couple things. That's kind of still in a state of flux. There were two items I took out of the city budget and put into the county budget, office equipment and travel, food, and lodging. So that will be zeroed out in my city budget for next fiscal year. Those items are coming out of my county budget because I'm paying for mopping and doofer out of the county budget for those very same things. That's most of the highlights. I'm willing to take questions.
Where's this drive up going to be? We'll have drive up book drop.
So that's in the lower parking lot. So as you
So like the back door.
no, so as you enter the lower parking lot, it's like a one-way. You go in one side, you go out the other side.
So that's just the regular parking lot you're talking about.
Yeah, the regular.
Okay.
On the
never thought of
lower.
that is the lower. Got it.
Yeah, it's on the lower parking lot right by the sidewalk. So as you start to get into the parking lot, you just roll down your window and put the books in the book drop.
Okay.
So it's very convenient. We check it throughout the day. I was afraid when we got it, there might be a lot of vandalism, but there has not been. It's been very clean. Nothing's been stolen. Sometimes it can get very full and stuff starts to overflow. And people, if they reach in there, could probably grab something, but that hasn't happened. And technically, they could put a lot of garbage in there, but they haven't done that. So everybody's been very well behaved. It's been great.
Yeah. One of my friends worked for the post office and said, don't ever put anything in the mailboxes on the street because people put trash in there.
Yeah,
And things
exactly.
get damaged and wet.
Yeah,
Never
exactly.
crossed my mind.
I've been at other libraries where that happened, but our patrons are really nice. Rod?
Just real quick, because we're on a time slide here, but total expenditures look like they're down about 120,000, while total revenues are up 130,000. So maybe you have some money to shift for the shortage you mentioned there earlier. Am I correct or not?
Some of the stuff switched to the county.
From
budget.
this budget, what we're seeing here is not,
My city budget.
so these numbers need to be adjusted.
Right.
Thank you.
He needs a second though.
That's good.
Dan, did you get your latest book?
I sure did, Jeff. Thank you so
Okay.
much. That doesn't get you out of hot water. No, I'm kidding. But you could help me follow the math, and it may be the same answer that you just gave Rod. I see the revenues are 2.1 and the expenditures are 2.7. Help me make sense of that. You're not running a $600,000 deficit, I'm pretty sure. So
No,
where that for
so
me?
in previous years, so we changed our format this year.
Uh.
In previous years, my operating budget did not include transfers or contingency fund.
Mm-hmm.
This year, that number includes those two numbers. So in regards to the contingency, I've never used my contingency fund before since I've been working at the Dalles Library. So that's almost 300,000. That's not going to get used. And then the library board, I'm extremely conservative and frugal. And my library board wants me to loosen up on the reins a bit and spend some of the funds. So they want me to eat into some of the cash carryover.
Ah.
So it's not as big as it doesn't continue to get too big. We want to use it.
Because the ending fund balance looks like, or was it? Almost $2 million, right? For the
Right.
year.
Carryover.
So that would be a significant bite into that. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So if I may, that's certainly a piece of it. You have your contingency there, which ideally is not used except under emergencies. And I think one of the things to highlight here, and maybe I should have added it at the very get-go, is that we're shifting from some of the general funds that we talked about last night into like the library fund, the airport fund, and public works funds, which are really treated unto their own. And so when we look, in addition to the contingency, when you look at capital on page 187, we're transferring a good amount into the capital project fund to pay for some of the items that Jeff noted. And so those monies will leave the library fund and go into the city's capital fund to build those banks, and then we run it out from that. So that's a piece of some of those deferred maintenance items to get caught up on, the library HVAC being the most important one so far. But still looking at elevators and roofs and the other maintenance needs up there as well.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions?
And I believe Angie Wilson has another comment here, but we are figuring out.
She has to unmute. She's a co-host, yeah.
Angie, if you can hear us, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Or text me and I can relay it. She says it's not letting her for some reason. Correct. So her comment is that they're using some of the beginning fund balance for some of those capital projects. So we're spending that down to fulfill those capital needs. They're not operating expenses like salaries and personnel costs, for example. So it's a good use of those funds to maintain the asset.
So it in fact is a balanced budget. It's not you're not running a deficit at the library.
No, I mean, we are spending down the beginning fund balance, but for capital expenses. So one-time expenses versus recurring would be another way to think of it.
Thank you.
This format's different. You can't see the unappropriated or the reserve for future expenditures, which would help to show that it all balances out.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the clarification. Any other questions? Then let's go ahead and move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, pardon? Oh, okay. Next, looks like airport.
And so we will jump in the budget just a little bit to page 285.
Good evening, committee. I could address Dan's question right off the get-go because I have a similar situation with the airport budget that reflects it looks like we're running in a deficit. But the clarification through Angie as well was that we are spending down it's carry through funds from last year that are going towards capital projects. On that, got a number of projects. The budget looks quite different than last year with having the previous college and business park grants in there. We were at $11 million budget last year, and we're down at a $4 million budget this year. But we still have a number of projects. We've got our master plan in process. We have the T hangars being built through the Connect Oregon grant. which will generate about $100,000 worth of revenue for the airport, getting us that much closer to the sustainability. Each of the projects that I'm working on at the airport are revenue driven, to try to drive this budget clear to a 0 point. One of the most notable things on the budget is the contractual services line took a substantial jump, and that is due to the understanding of the most recent budget and our agreement with Clickitat County to, in the way that, how would I say that? In the way that we're running the finances will now be run through as a contractual service from the city of the Dalles instead of actually as a fund.
Yeah, so I can add a little bit of detail to that. So we have had a joint operating agreement with Clickitat County since 2002. And we had a very productive joint work session with Clickitat County Commission about a month or so ago, where we received direction to look at that joint operating agreement and how we jointly operate the airport. And so typically in years past, the city has provided services and has held this airport fund and more or less, and provided financial services and legal services and things of that nature. And if you recall the administrative transfer that we charge the library and public works for services provided, we would charge the airport for those services rendered. However, and we're trying to position us to be flexible here. If the joint operating agreement revision results in a separate entity, some similar to Q Life, if you're familiar with Quality Life, the fiber company that's owned by the city, the county, and the Northern Wasco County PUD, it would be a separate entity, and we would provide services to them on a contractual basis versus a kind of an internal transfer amongst city departments. And so it's a little bit of wonkiness here, frankly, in the budget to try and give us the flexibility and adaptability to what the results of the JOA review may be. The timeline for that review of the JOA it was 6 months. It's probably 5 months now. And depending on that decision, we'll be better able to inform this going forward. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm happy to clarify any point I just made.
Okay. Anyone?
The other notable increase is in the audit services, and that was due to the complexity of the airport and that joint operating agreement and the number of grants that we processed through the airport last year. And we have a number of very large projects that are in the process of buttoning up and will be completed this year. Still have a new fuel tank system that's being installed as we speak, and emergency generator system. Those are all both off of Oregon Corps grants, which is Critical Oregon Airport Relief. We were very successful in that grant cycle, again, getting money for the airport. And our T hangars is probably our largest. We'll have 20 new T hangars for the airport by the fall of next year. That will, like I say, generate about $100,000 of revenue towards our airport. Number of things have been trimmed. We went through last year's budget, and there's a number of items that we have some equipment costs that have gone down dramatically. Been successful in finding a few pieces of equipment, some mower, and we have an opportunity with Boeing Field is surplusing us a number of pieces of equipment, so we'll have a very large conglomeration of snowplows and brooms for the airport at a very minimal expense. And so we were able to trim some of the expected expenditures to purchase that stuff out of our budget, and yet leaving us with quite a tight budget this year in comparison to last year. But there's not a lot of other highlights there unless you have specific questions. Yes, please.
If I may add one comment, if you'll turn to page 287, you'll see other financing sources, loan proceeds. And you'll notice last year there was 1.2 million budgeted there, and this year it's 360,000, which is associated with the T hangars Jeff spoke about just now. That change is due to some of the evolving dynamics with the EDA project and the college hangar that we have over there. So there, when we were last year working on putting together the financial capital stack for that project and trying to find all the matching monies that we needed to have that project go forward, there was a concept last year about of a curb loan, some kind of loan that would help finance that project, which is not reflected in the city's budget now. That financing stack for that project is wholly within the Klickitat County's budget as they're running that project. And so we will contribute our matching funds to that project, which is approximately $500,000. But that's some of the context behind that big jump in this particular line item.
And then at the fruition of that, at the end of that contract, when they get a certificate of occupancy, that asset is handed off to the airport and becomes a revenue stream for the airport as well.
I'm just curious to know what was the outreach to get Boeing to give you or offer? Did you see that, or how did you do that? Make
That
that
was-
connection?
Relationship at one of the conferences that I've gone to, Washington Aviation Conference. David Ducato is the airport manager up there, and he and I hit it off in one of the meetings, and we were sharing pictures of our airports, and I showed him a picture of my personal pickup out there one day clearing some snow off, and that started down the path of, is that what you use? I was like, well, yeah, right now.
Let's see.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Two really quick questions. I think the reason that the total grants went down last year was budgeted for 8.7 million and it's 2.9 this year. I think that's because you're wrapping up projects, like you said earlier. Is that accurate?
It's wrapping up projects, and we pulled a lot of what was Klickitat County and EDA money. There was grant money coming through that we didn't know how last year the anticipation was that we would be running the finance on it. And as we dug deeper into that, it turned out that those loans are Washington loans, and they had to be run through Klickitat County. So we had to pull all of those numbers out. And it made my budget very wonky. It's been hard to understand,
Okay.
even for us.
South Apron project.
And then
The South Apron project is finishing up, yes.
okay. And then the only other question, I don't remember what the it's 391.22. It's from special enterprise zone. Last year was 890,000. I don't remember what that was for.
So I believe that was, and if you give me 1 second, I can double check, but it was probably a combination of the EDA grant. Give me one moment here.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had 350,000 as a transfer in support of the EDA grant. We had planned for the T-hanger grant and the T-hanger loan. And so, the match ultimately for the EDA grant is 500,000 now, with some of the cost escalations and delays associated with that project.
Okay.
And then we've been facilitating the grant and loan package for the T-hangers, and that's moving forward.
Thanks.
We'll go to bid on the T-hangers here within the month.
Can you tell us briefly about just speak a little bit to the long-term lease with Washington DNR, please?
They have long-term is in 5 years at this point on the nearest building to the west from the FBO, from where my office is at. There's the red and white hangar they lease all of the office space in that. They lease 2 tie downs for helicopters and a place for 2 fuel trucks and a shower trailer that they bring in every year for their helicopter crews. And they staff the airport with, in the past, they've always staffed it with 1 to 2 helicopters every year throughout the fire season. They lease that building right now, again, for 5 years. Just as a point of note on that, it sounds like this year they may pull all the helicopters out of this region or at least for DNR, and we may end up with 6 Fireboss aircraft here this year instead of just the 2. So things are rapidly changing with the fire services, and we're working with each of them to try to. Last year I had 1.17 helicopters there, anywhere from DNR U.S. Forest Service and Oregon Department of Forestry using that closed runway, which is no longer there. And putting, now I'm working with where do we put those helicopters? Because we generated about $50,000 in revenue just in tie down fees last year off of firefighting assets here. They pay us a daily fee that's a pass through back to the agency that dispatches them on the fire.
So I guess my follow-up question is, your sense is that DNR and some sort of aerial firefighting resources will be there for a while?
I would say unless we do something to run them off, I would say indefinitely. We're in the center of Region 6 fire district, and yes, they want to be here. Their next closest assets are in Yakima, and it seems to be a pretty good mix. The fire boss are much more effective here because of the river than the helicopters, so that's what some of that switch is. But yes, we would have to do something horribly wrong, or the business would just have to really change for them not to be here.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on. Public Works. I miss saying Mr. Anderson.
I was gonna say, as I came up, as you can see, there's been some big changes at the Public Works Department over the last year, and particularly in the last few months. And one of the things that Dave is handing out to each of you is a list of acronyms that are within the Public Works budget. So that can hopefully answer some of those questions and keep us from getting asked. Because Dave just recently retired, effective as of March 3rd. So, we're just essentially a couple months into my tenure here as the Public Works Director. I brought some other key staff members from the Public Works Division to help assist in this presentation if any questions arise that I might need help in trying to answer. So I'd like to give just a quick introduction to each of them. So David Mills was the city's transportation manager. He is now recently, within the last month, taken over the city's deputy public works director position. And we have just recently filled the transportation manager position, and that employee will be starting on May 19th. So in a couple weeks from now. So
Who's that, Dale?
who is that?
Yeah.
His name is Stephen Sprague, but he goes by the name James Sprague, and he's an ODOT employee for the past 10 years up in the Parkdale office up there. So along with David here, we have Tyler Mitchell, who is the city's water quality manager, and he is located out at the Wicks Water Treatment Plant. So you can raise your hand there. Also, we have Jerry Anderson. He is the city's water distribution manager. And then we have Steve Byers, who is the city's wastewater collection manager. And then we have Jill Hoyenga, who is the city's regulatory compliance manager. So I'd like to thank each of them for coming tonight and here as well last night, just to help out in this presentation. So with that, I guess I will try to begin. So the Public Works budget begins on page 189. And the city's Public Works Department is responsible for operating and maintaining the city's water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, transportation, or street systems. The Public Works Department is organized in 6 different divisions. We have the regulatory compliance manager that Jill Hoyenga is in. We have the water supply and treatment plant, which is out at the Wicks Water Treatment Plant. We have the wastewater treatment plant right over here by the cherry growers that is contractually operated and maintained by Jacobs. Then we also have the water distribution division, the wastewater collection division, and the streets and transportation division. We also have an engineering division at Public Works that consists of 3 engineers and then also a construction inspector. And then we have 3 in our administrative staff office. So total out at Public Works, including the Wicks Water Treatment Plant, we have 47 FTE employees. The city's Public Works budget consists of 8 different funds or budgets that we'll be discussing tonight. There's Fund 5, the Street Fund, Fund 9, the Public Works Reserve Fund, Fund 13, the Street Reserve Fund, Fund 51, the Water Utility Fund, Fund 53, which is the Water Capital Reserve Fund, Fund 55, which is the Wastewater Utility Fund, Fund 56, which is the Wastewater Capital Reserve Fund, and then Fund 57 is the Wastewater Treatment Plant or Sewer Plant Reserve Fund. So with that, I will kind of start beginning going through these pages. There are several pages that outline kind of some of the goals for the upcoming year and the some of the accomplishments that we had accomplished over the last year. I'm not going to really go into those, but if anybody has any questions or comments from things that they'd seen on there, feel free to ask and I will try to answer those. So with starting in the street fund, I'd like to kind of look at page 207 to begin talking about the street fund budget there. The street fund receives its main revenue sources from the franchise fees, also the local 3-cent a gallon fuel tax, and then the state motor vehicle fund. We have also received funds from the general fund over the last couple of years for mainly contributing to ADA ramps and a backlog of ADA ramps that we have to construct and get designed over the last couple of years and probably the next couple of years coming up. And then one of the other sources of funding that we have is from our water utility fund and our wastewater utility fund as well. The city franchises ourselves for a 3% of the gross utility revenue or utility from those utility funds to help compensate for the damage that the water utility fund and the wastewater utility fund create with our streets when they're installing a new water or sewer main, or also even sewer and water laterals. When they cut in a trench and to install those new laterals or those new lines, it always results back in having to do a trench patch. And so that decreases the life of the road. So that's why we're franchising ourselves, just like we do all the other franchise utilities, such as the PUD and the Northwest Natural Gas and some of the fiber lines. So let me switch pages now. So back at the top of page 27, one of the items there under the franchise utility fees, you'll see that last year under Zayo Group, they had a franchise fee of $5,000 listed. This year, it's gone up to $33,436. The big reason for that big jump and increase in their franchise fee is that over the last couple years, we've had some significant challenges with Zayo and their fiber line with utility locates where their line was located. And then their locates not being accurate and holding up some of our projects. One of them that's the biggest one that everybody's probably aware of is up there on 9th Street by 9th and Quinton and 10th by Hecka Park, which is closed down right now because we just completed the rock drilling contract that we had up there for getting our new sanitary sewer and storm lines. We've had to relocate those because of the ZAO line and because of the mismarks of that. So anyway, the city attorney, because of the issues that we've had, the city attorney revisited that franchise agreement and renegotiated the franchise fees associated with that project. So their franchise fees have been increased substantially and under that agreement. So that is the big increase there. So now switching to page 209, looking under the special studies and reports, or excuse me, back up at the top there under the engineering services, we have, again, money's being set aside in the amount of $50,000 for engineering services for helping assist in the design of the backlog of some of those ADA ramps that we're going to be trying to get installed. ADA ramps take a lot of effort to get an ADA ramp designed so that it can be built to, there's very tight tolerances and very detailed information that needs to be done with each of those ramps. So there's a lot involved with those, and with just the backlog of work that we have with other things, that's what this $50,000 is for, to get some assistance to help in getting a backlog of those ADA ramps designed so we can get those out for construction. One of the other things that we have been doing to help the ADA ramp backlog too is we do have a couple members on our transportation or street crew that do have concrete experience and have shown that they have the ability to construct and install these ADA ramps, as complicated as they can be. And so we have a few of the members on that staff in-house that have been constructing some ADA ramps that in-house that we are designing as well. And a couple of those that if you get up in the 13th and Federal and Short Street area, you'll see several new ramps up there that our city street crews just did. So that's a huge benefit to the department to have members of the crews that are able to do that. So, and that is definitely helping with some of the costs too, by being able to do them in-house. On page 209, also there under the special studies and reports, again, just this is something that has been mentioned in the previous budget last year, is again for the study and replacement and of the 6th Street Bridge. That is something that is remaining in the budget, as we weren't able to get to that over this year, but we're making it a priority to get done as soon as this budget is adopted and we start this new fiscal year. The 6th Street Bridge, originally back in 2001 is one of my first projects when I started here with the city of the Dalles. We put a new bridge deck and the new railing system on the bridge through an urban renewal project. And with that project, that was to help extend the life of the project. But the studies and reports that were done back in the 1990s and the late 80s, early 90s, basically said that with the improvements that could possibly be done, that the bridge life would be extended by about 20 years. And we're well past that stage already. And we do have load restrictions on that bridge. And the latest reports from the inspection reports that we've been getting from ODOT are basically saying that the bridge is probably at a point that we need to have it replaced. So that's what the funds for this project are. And it's going to be, you know, a pretty significant study and report of what all is going to take into account to have to replace that structure. So that's why the funds for this project, for that study and report are so high. Another study and report that we're budgeting for is a 6th Street pedestrian crossing. And that is looking at having a study done to look at putting a mid-block crossing on 6th Street between Cherry Heights and Weber Street. As a lot of times there's a lot of school buses or buses that are that they go over to the Cascade Square area and they park, and then kids and travelers or whatever, they get off the bus and they want to head across the street over to the McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Taco Bell, all those places, and there's no place for them to cross without either running across the street or having to go clear down to Weber and cross at the crosswalk and the controlled crossing, or clear up at Cherry Heights, which is quite a distance away. So we're going to be looking at doing a study and report if there's the feasibility of putting like a mid-block crosswalk in there somewhere that would be able to allow that crossing to happen in a safe manner for all those pedestrians.
It's not just kids.
Exactly,
They
yeah.
cross
Yeah,
in the middle of, I want to go from Fred's to the credit union, or,
yeah.
you know, I'm grocery outlet. Is it possible to put 2 in?
That
Is that
might be something that we look with the report.
Because that's
it
a
is-
lot of blocks.
It is going to be challenging just because of the sheer amount of traffic that is on there, and trying to put in that's why we're definitely having this study and report to look at all aspects of it and the feasibility of it.
So looking at Hood River the other day, are you looking more at the push button type crosswalk where not overhead lights, but
Most likely
traffic flows normally until somebody hits that button and then
Yeah.
it flashes?
called the RRFB, which is that rectangular rapid flashing beacon that we're installing a couple of those with our 10th Street Safe Routes to School project, and the one we have up at
Good idea.
19th and then the one on 2nd Street by AutoZone there. So most likely that's what that will.
Independent person come in and just study the.
We'll be putting a advertisement out for services for that report. For this report and the amount of money that we're kind of looking at, we may be able to like self-appoint it to Kittleson and Associates. They're the ones that did our transportation system plan update recently. We've worked with them on quite a few projects over the past few years, so it might be something that we can just look to directly appoint with them, just because of their knowledge that they already have with our TSP update and our system.
Anything else? I have a couple of curiosity questions.
Okay.
Will the 6th Street Bridge be widened?
I would anticipate that if a new structure is being built there, yes, it will be.
And then what happens with the traffic flow?
Or
When
while
when
construction,
it's being constructed?
that will all come out when we get ready to do that. But that is one of the key reasons why this Cherry Heights extension went in years prior to that. And that was all pointed out and part of the original environmental impact study and report that was done for the 6th Street Bridge back in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was one of the key points, was to keep 6th Street as a historic structure at that period. And the narrow bridge as an alternative was to build the Cherry Heights extension and be able to divert people
Understood.
around that way.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yep.
Or, yes, Jen?
I have a question in regards to the streets that are owned by Wasco County versus the city of the Dalles and their maintenance. Um, when I first moved to the Dalles, I thought, why do we have all of these unpaved streets, ruts, and narrow streets, but yet we have next to it paved streets with curbs and sidewalks? And I learned that quite a few of the streets are still owned by Wasco County, but given to the city. Is
Yes, so,
that
okay.
And so I don't want to stifle conversation and discussion, but I just want to reference, and I'll let Dale give it a abbreviated answer. But we want to focus on the budget book that we have before us. We got a lot to go through, and I don't want to. I look to the chair to provide some guidance for me if needed. I want him to answer that question, but I want to make sure we don't drift too far off into the weeds on certain projects or traffic flow or other things like that. So I'll hand it back to Dale to answer.
Okay.
Just want to place that reminder out there.
Well, actually, I was leading to your, one of your projects is to make the areas around the schools safer as far as traffic flow. Is that within our discussion? Thank you. I noticed that with the new development with Curtis Homes, it brings a lot more people down Trevitt and across, Colonel Wright.
Mhm.
Are there plans to perhaps develop the streets around, for instance, Colonel Wright, to make that area safer, to divert some of the traffic away from having to go by Colonel Wright because of the additional traffic?
So to answer your first question, just real quick, all the streets within the city of the Dalles that are within the city limits that were owned by Wasco County at one point in time have been transferred to the city of the Dalles. So all streets within the city limits are city streets, no longer Wasco County streets. The only streets that are in the city limits that are not under city's jurisdiction are a couple that are owned by ODOT, and that's I-84, 197, and East Second Street from the Boat Basin overpass out to Big Jim's. All the other streets in the city limits are city streets.
Okay.
So to quickly answer your question regarding like Colonel Wright, the school district had a safe routes to school plan that was developed about 3 years ago with a project identification program grant that they had received. That's one of the projects that are being constructed that I'll mention here in a little bit is our 10th Street Safe Routes to School project that was identified in that PIP grant. We also did some project identification projects up around the Colonel Wright area. And it was more to help with the drop off and the pickup times. And as you can see over the last year or two, some changes were made to people were lining up on Trevitt Street and they were lined clear up down by 14th up to 16th. They were blocking up that uphill lane or the southbound lane while particularly during the pickup time in the afternoon. The traffic got shifted where they now have to go over on 16th over to like the Fort Dalles Museum and Garrison Street, I think it is there, and wrap around that way. And then on 16th, as people are picking up their kids and the traffic is moving forward, then they just cross Trevitt Street. So that Trevitt Street, which is the collector street, is no longer being blocked like it had been previously. Correct. So those are some improvements that are being made and for that out of that project. So
Much appreciated, by the
you.
way.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's
Okay.
move ahead.
okay, let's see. The next thing I wanted to mention in the street fund is on page 214. It's under the street construction supplies. Just wanted to mention like the chip seal program. There's nothing ordinary, out of the ordinary for that project. Other than that's just our annual project that we contract with Wasco County to do the chip seal work for the city of the Dalles. The monies for this are for purchasing the rock, the oil, and paying for the labor and the trucks that Wasco County provides. The city's biggest contribution besides those funds for that is we provide all the traffic control during that project, which is pretty substantial because it's a moving project that requires a lot of coordination for the traffic and with that. So, and then also the other thing, the next project listed under that is the crack seal program. Last year, we only had about $1,572 budgeted for that project. That was not near enough with everything that we got to do. So that's why we've bumped this up to 58.5 for this year. And that will be for purchasing crack seal material for the city crews to be doing that work.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, down below there, you have a miscellaneous expenses for $10. I'm just curious what is it for toothpaste? I don't know. What do you need for $10?
I might have to.
Yeah, I can add. That's for a MasterCard charge off of that all of our divisions or all of our funds contribute to, and that was the easiest way for us to get that in there several years ago. It's an annual fee.
You put, MasterCard charge on there instead of miscellaneous. It seems a little weird.
Thank you, David.
Good catch. All right.
Okay, the next item that I wanted to mention is on page 215. And it's again under the capital projects, under the street fund, and it's that ADA sidewalk programs. And that's, again, is for that backlog of curb ramps that are to be installed. So, and that we'll be working on. So that's pretty much everything that I had highlighted under the street fund. Are there any other questions related to the street fund?
When we opened bids on those ADA corners a couple of years ago, a few years ago, it was like $8,000 an intersection. Is that still, or has that gone up a lot?
Well, it was about, we were looking at, paying about $10,000 per ramp. And it's still in that $10,000 to $12,000 range. But like I said, we have been taking on some of those projects in-house with our crews, and we're looking at our costs, direct costs that for materials and what it's costing us, they're more closer down to around that $6,000 range. So it is a significant difference for us to be able to do those as much as we can. So, okay, so jumping to Fund 9, the Public Works Reserve Fund, just a couple items that I wanted to mention there is related to the street fund. We're looking at banking monies this year for a small paving machine, or a smaller paving machine that will be most likely budgeted for and purchased in next year's fiscal year. But the reason for this smaller paving machine is that we can go down to an 8-foot width, where right now our current paving machine is 11-foot width. So it's a little bit more difficult to do some of the smaller paving projects. And we are doing a couple of paving projects here in the near future for some of the parking lots that the city owns. And this will be able to help with projects like that and of those sizes. One of the other items that's going to be a really big asset to the city if we get this purchased is the volumetric concrete truck. So this is a truck that can mix up concrete for smaller projects, like down to just a yard or two of concrete that we have right now. When we're doing a project such as even like some of those ADA ramps that we're doing in-house, or if there's a new water sewer service line that went in and we have to tear up a curb and a sidewalk to get those utility laterals in, and then we have to replace the concrete. A lot of times we might only just need a yard or two of concrete, but because of the demand of concrete, particularly out in the port area, everybody, all the concrete contractors are experiencing a long lead time in being able to get concrete orders, and they have now implemented a 5-yard minimum concrete order. So if you need a yard or two of concrete, you're still having to pay for 5 yards. Those costs that we're looking at, we're paying upwards of $325 a yard. So, if you're only needing 1 yard, but you're having to pay 5-yard minimum, that's a lot of costs that we shouldn't have to be paying. So that's what we're looking at, purchasing this smaller truck that will be split 3 ways, both by all the street fund, the water utility fund, and the wastewater fund to purchase that truck. So those were the 2 big items that I wanted to mention on here. And we're going to be building bank for a future street sweeper and a couple other items like that. But that's really all I wanted to touch base with on the Fund 9. But if there's any other questions or items on that, I'd be happy to answer before we move on to the next fund.
Seeing no questions.
Okay. So the next fund then is Fund 13. So just the projects that I wanted to talk about there is on page 222. Just basically looking at the capital projects. We have several big projects that are underway right now, or one that's getting ready to begin here in the near future. The first one is the 6th Street widening project. That is the one that's occurring out there on 6th Street in front of by Snipes, between Snipes and Hostetler, doing the widening so that we're widening that to a consistent width and getting that center refuge lane that was non-existent between Snipes and Hostetler, getting that installed. Part of the funding for this project came from ODOT All Roads Transportation Safety Grant that we had received. And that's helping to pay for that. We're also putting in the new curb, gutter, sidewalk, and new drive approaches on that west side of the road there, or the across from the ditch and the rock wall there. So, and that's that big project that we have going on right now. It is slated to be completed by the end of September is the completion date for that project. The East 12th Street sidewalk and storm improvement project. That's a project that's occurring right now up on East 12th Street between Thompson Street and the top of the hill just prior to Richmond Street. We're installing a new storm line and putting in new curb, gutter, sidewalk on the north side of 12th Street. And there will be quite a few retaining walls associated with that project as well. We did receive grant fundings for that project from the ARPA grant, and that is I always forget exactly what the ARPA stood for, but that's the American Rescue Plan and Act grant that we had received funds for. in the amount of $1,612,482 for that project. So that's underway, and that project is set to be completed by about the end of October. And because of the grant funding, it absolutely has to be completed by the end of December of 2025. But we should have no problem meeting that. And
Is-
Um,
Sorry, is
Oh,
that
sorry.
because of the neighborhood that's going to be built where the cherry orchard is there? Is that for kids walking to school?
that is not, it's not being built for them. It's being built just to better serve and provide pedestrian services for that area up there. And that was a result and a finding of when that project was being appealed to the Planning Commission. That was a strong information and request from a bunch of the neighbors up there of needing pedestrian facilities within that area. So that's with this grant money that we were receiving, that's what was decided to use those grant monies for, was to meet that neighborhood need. This is going up to that project. So if and when that piece of property ever develops, it's for sale right now again, but if and when that property ever develops, they will be required to tie on to the improvements that are being installed with this project and complete the project around their development.
It's also in the TSP, right?
Yes, and it was also identified as a need in the transportation system plan.
And one thing I wanted to note here is at the top of the page on page 222, there's the special grants fund, and that's where the bulk of those ARPA dollars came in last year. And as Dale noted, we have to use those funds. We have to expend all those funds and have it closed out by the end of the year. We've used ARPA over the past couple of years to support a number of different projects. We've used it to support the digitization project that we have here, updating, dated software in our planning department, for example. One of those projects has come under budget, and so staff's recommending that we add $32,000 to this transfer that you see at the top here to go to the 12th Street project. The ARPA monies that we transferred over don't cover the whole thing. And since this project is active and moving forward, this would be a good use of those remaining ARPA dollars and get them out the door by the end of the deadline, before the end of the deadline. So that would be one change at the top of this page here. And just wanted to note that, and we'll include that in the summary at the end.
On the East 12th Street project, is it fair to say that the neighbors initiated that as a request to the city to build that? Or was it more the city's idea?
It was that the request was heard from that process of going through the land use appeal, both at the Planning Commission and at the City Council level. The concern was raised about pedestrian safety out there in that area and the lack of sidewalks. So
I was getting at it, so it's fair to say that you've had this widespread support from the adjoining property owners, from Thompson all the way up? Has it been pretty favorable?
I would say so. I mean, I prior to this project had met with most of the property owners up there. We sent out notices and had several meetings. Some of them weren't attended very well, but the people that we have talked to, it's been in favor of. So the last project that I wanted to bring to the attention on this page 222 is the 10th Street Safe Routes to School project. That was just presented at the city council at the last city council meeting, and we received authorization to award that project. That project is getting underway. Hopefully starting construction on that here towards the end of this month, end of May, with the completion date set for August 29th at the end of summer, just prior to school resuming session for next fall. That is a project that's going to be on the east side or the river side of 10th Street between Snipes and Chenoweth Loop Road. It'll be installing the new sidewalks where there are no sidewalks, filling in the gaps. So there'll be a consistent sidewalk all the way from Snipes to Chenoweth Loop Road. We'll be installing a couple RRFBs, that rectangular rapid flashing beacons. At one will be installed at Emerson Street where it crosses 10th Street, and the second one will be installed at Chenoweth Loop itself. And that's a Safe Routes to School project that was identified in the school's Safe Routes to School master plan that was developed as part of that project identification program and grant that they had received. The city applied for and was awarded a grant through the ODOT Safe Routes to School in the amount of $1,994,016 for that project. So that project is mostly being paid for by that grant that we received from ODOT, along with a $200,000 match by the school district and a $200,000 match by the city of the Dalles. That basically covers the items that I wanted to mention as part of the Transportation System Reserve Fund, Fund 13. So if you have any questions on that, I'd take those now before moving to the next fund.
Seeing no questions. Any questions? Yes, Counselor.
Just a comment.
Yes.
Once again, congratulations, or I should say thank you and gratitude for city staff winning a lot of grants. It allows us to do a lot of projects with pretty small local taxpayer lift, all things considered.
Yes, thank you. Those three projects were definitely big projects to get on the ground. So the next fund is to begin talking about is the Fund 51 Water Utility Fund. The first thing that I'd like to point out regarding this fund is that on page 239, just make sure that we notice that we're splitting from the water treatment portion of the water utility fund to the water distribution fund. So the water treatment is the Fund 51, 5,000, and then the water distribution fund becomes the Fund 51, 5,100. So just wanted to point that out as part of that. So
sorry, what page are you on? We don't have the fund numbers, so
that's on page 239 is where that split
It's the
happens.
account number.
there we go.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, but I will start kind of up by, well, the first thing I guess that I can start on that I was is on page 228, looking at the total revenues for the water utility fund. The one thing that would like to mention there for the kind of the increase in the projected revenues from this year over the projected or the revenues from the previous year is under the intergovernmental line item there. If you go back to, let's see, page 251, you'll notice that we've received two grants there. One is for the U.S. Forest Legacy Grant in the amount of $2,100,000. And then the one above that is the OWEB Drinking Water Source Protection Grant. That's Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board grant. And those monies are being received as revenue into the budget, but they'll be being expended for the purchase of the Arrowhead Ranch property that we're looking to be able to purchase through that Forest Legacy grant, particular for 3,600 acres of the Arrowhead Ranch to add into as watershed controlled property and city owned. Also part of that intergovernmental is on page 250, there's a hazard mitigation grant through FEMA. And that is monies there that are for backup generators that we're going to be, or that we're supposed to be receiving a grant for FEMA for backup generators at all of our well houses and lift station sites.
And will that actually happen?
The last word we received is it still is supposed to be happening. And that was just as of last week, in fact. So
Dale, what was that last one? It was on page 250.
it's the hazard mitigation grant under FEMA.
Okay, thanks.
And then the other point to make there on the chart for the projected revenue is the charges for services. And we're, excuse me, I'm back on page 228. Sorry. Looking under charges for services, and that is projected rate increase or additional income because of the 7.1% rate increase for the water rates that was identified in the water master plan update project that we just recently implemented. So, and that will be for the entire year for that 7.1% increase.
Dale, if you compare the budget for next year with what we actually received in 23-24, which I assume would be similar to what we're getting this year, comes like 15% increase. We know why, if we're increasing rates by 7%, why would revenues go up 15?
Well, it's because of the 7.1% rate increase, but then also because of the monies that we're receiving from those grants, all of those grants that are coming in up underneath the intergovernmental
Grants are
section.
included in charges for services?
No, the grants are included in the projected revenue. But and then also anticipated consumption increases under that charges for services.
Okay, so we're raising rates and we expect people to.
But we're also going to be using more water this year is what we're projecting. Okay. So the first, leaving this and getting into the actual utility fund itself, looking on page 233, the one item there to mention is this sludge lagoon cleaning contract. That is a contract that we renew approximately every 3 years. And they're anticipated to be like $75,000 per year. And so that's just something that's done up at the Wicks water treatment plant and that facility. So I just wanted to mention that project. On page 234, there's tree removal trimming. And that is another project that's up at the Wicks water treatment plant and that site that was removing some trees from around the sludge ponds. And then also the city is also working with Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, and they're going to be coming out and doing some tree removal and brush removal kind of as a grant that to help alleviate some of the fire hazard up around the wastewater or the water treatment plant here. And they're going to be doing that next week, I believe. Is that correct, Tyler? So Next item is on page 235. And it's the watershed road construction down at the bottom of the page. So the city just over this last year recently completed a timber forest management plan. And these funds are some projects that were identified in that forest management plan up in the watershed, and it's for watershed road construction and maintenance. And it will be focusing on replacing culverts that have been identified to need to be replaced, and also some bridge repairs up in the watershed. So that's what that project will be for. The next item I had is on page 236, and it's the Starlink. And so the city used to get our internet service and phone up at the Wicks Water Treatment Plant from phone lines, T1 lines that were provided through CenturyLink or Lumen. And we were constantly having problems with our service up there. And then Blue Mountain kind of started providing some of the internet service, and we were having problems with that as well. And so this was the installation of Starlink up there to help get better internet service and communications provided to that facility up there. The next item to mention is on page 237 under the training and conferences. Just wanted to point out that this is a substantial increase in the training and conferences for particularly up at the Wicks Water Treatment Plant. So we have, let's see, we have 5 newer staff members up there that are all needing training and certification. They're required to have a certain level of operator level 1, operator level 2 or 3 for working up at the treatment plant, and they need to have continuing education. And so this fund here is for providing that service and getting them the training and the certification requirements that they need. So next item is on page 238 under the chemical lab supplies. And that's gone up quite a bit, and that is due to the water treatment chemicals. The Wicks Water Treatment Plant has two labs. One is our biological lab that we provide service for doing water tests for the region, that people can bring samples out and get tests done. And then we also have our wet lab or daily lab testing that we provide for meeting the requirements of the testing for the water quality, and that is being produced up at the treatment plant. We were recommended to increase the budgeting of those chemicals up by 15%. So that's part of the increase there. And then the other aspect is that we will be making more water over the course of this next year for projects that are being brought online out in the port area. And then the other thing that we noticed is that budget item had been froze for quite a few years, and it was time to needing to get it brought up to where it needed to be. So that's some of the increases in that budget right there. The next item is on page 239. And that is for the improvements other than the buildings, that's the rotork valve replacement parts and the hypochloric storage tanks. Those are two projects that need to be done to have some additional the rotork valve replacement parts are, or those valves are what are used for running our filter backwashes. And so we need to have replacement parts for those valves to just make those, get them up where they're functioning better and we're not having any downtime with having to, due to a breakdown on those valves. And then also the hypochloric storage tanks are about 3 to 4 years past their service life. So we're getting monies budgeted to replace those. That kind of gets us through the water treatment side of that budget. And so this is where we're now going to switch into the water distribution side. So the first thing that I wanted to point out on the water distribution side is on page 241. And wanted to mention the Itron service agreement. The Itron is for our radio read for all of our water meters that the city has for being able to read the so used to in the past, the city had to go out and manually read all of the meters. That was quite time consuming and took a couple members from the water distribution crew several days, if not over a week, to do that. And so now that we have the Itron radio reads, we can do that in just with one person in a day, basically running around and getting those. So wanted to point that out. And then the second item is there just below that on the Q Life Riverside Booster Pump Station in Wells. That is an increase for getting the Q Life brought to that site and going to be providing the internet service at the new wells and the reservoirs at that Riverside water facility site for providing the SCADA system and the connection back to the city's SCADA system at the Public Works Department. And so that's the big fee for the monthly payment that will be being accruing for those Q Life services. The other item to mention on this page is under the special studies and report, ASR monitoring, in the amount of $56,000 there. That's going to be for a one-year contract with our GSI contractor to be providing for those monitoring and testing of the ASR well out there at the Riverside water facility site too, and monitor that over the next year, meeting those requirements. The next item is on page 245, skipping ahead under training and conferences. Under the water distribution side, what this training increase is for is that the city has a boom truck for being able to it's like a crane. And in order to operate that truck, we have to have crane certification, or people that are certified with the crane certification to run that. The crane certification is very expensive, and we're looking to get 3 operators through that training for being able to have at least 3 or 4 members at the Public Works facility that can operate that boom truck with the proper certification. So skipping ahead, still in the water utility fund on page 246. The under the chemical lab supplies, the chemical the one that I wanted to point out is the chemical reagents there at the very bottom of the page. The reason for this big increase is because of the two new reservoirs and wells that we will and be receiving out at the Riverside Water Facility site. And those being added to the system and having to maintain and operate those and the chemicals that it will take. So next item is on page 247 and under the Tokay updates. This is some Tokay software, which is a brand new or updating our backflow testing software. And we're needing to purchase this new software because our old software that we've been using is no longer supported. So if an issue arises with that, then we are on our own. So that's why we're looking at updating to the new version. So looking at page 248 as well, on 248, let's see, Public Works Reserve Fund, where did I have that? Down there towards the bottom of the page, to Public Works Reserve Fund in the amount of the 209,614. Just wanted to mention that's transferring monies from the Water Utility Fund to the Water Capital Reserve, or to the Public Works Reserve Fund, Fund 9, for the purchase of future equipment or vehicles in the from the Water Utility Fund. And then also on page 248, wanted to point this one out under water lines. We have 9th and Clark. This project is going to be replacing an existing 2-inch galvanized line on 9th and Clark. We have $30,000 budgeted for that project here. That project will be being constructed in-house by our water distribution crews. This is mainly for purchasing of materials to be able to do that project. But it was also included on page 253 under the Water Capital Reserve Fund. You'll see under water lines, 9th and Clark, $30,000 for that same project. That was something that we discovered as we were going through and preparing for this presentation. So we can remove that fund, the $30,000 from this capital reserve project, and just have it for that one project identified in the water utility fund.
Yeah. I have just a thing, maybe you've already covered it. Right below there, it says contingency. Last year it was 4113, and this year it's 249,667. 51,9,500, 8800 contingency. Just out of curiosity, have we addressed that at all?
I will let Matthew answer that.
Yeah, so typically with contingency, we budget for it and we hope never to use it. And so when you look in those prior years, we didn't use it. We did use some of that in this last budgeted year. The 249 is the contingency for this particular fund to use in case of emergencies and whatnot. Hopefully we don't. Next year, you'll see it zeroed out, and then we'll bring it forward again as part of our budget process next year.
So the number is basically what's left of something and you just put it off as contingency, or is it calculated for a reason. Do you expect something? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I would refer back to some of the guiding policies that we use where we shoot for that kind of 10% contingency. I'd have to double check and confirm that that was the philosophy that was used here. We don't typically just use the leftover number for the contingency because we also take into consideration transfers to capital reserve and building those funds for different projects. But maybe I might share a glance over here at our finance staff. Or not to put them
Matthew.
on the. Oh, thank you, Angie.
Yes. Okay, so last year there was not a huge contingency amount that was available. This year we do have more of a contingency amount that can be used if needed, and so it is a better number this year than what it was actually last year. So if the projects needed to be done, they would have had to find a place to cut in the budget, where this year they will be able to use some contingency money if they need to do an adjustment. Does that make sense?
Yes, it looks like that is the more to the appropriate number than 4113.
Yes, it was, we just had more of a shortage of fund. And then also just a reminder, and I can't think off my head right now, but we do, through the year, we do supplemental budgets and we do budget resolutions. And so the numbers that you are seeing is the adjusted budget to year to date. So we probably have already removed some of that contingency money and moved it up into other items to be able to expenditure out for the year. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Angie and Matthew. So that kind of wrapped up my discussion of the utility fund items before moving on to the water capital reserve fund. So if there's any other questions on the water utility fund, I would take those now.
Dan,
5-minute break.
Henry,
5-minute break.
well, you need a break? So do I. Let's take a 5-minute break. Everyone run.
Don't have to wait. Just go.
Gonna go. Okay,
Okay.
we're back to order. Please continue.
Okay, so now we'll be jumping to Fund 53, the Water Capital Reserve Fund. Just the main thing that I wanted to talk about was just highlight a couple of these projects here. The first one is on page 251, 252, and again, I already mentioned it a little bit earlier, and that was the receiving the funds for the U.S. Forest Legacy Grant and OWEB for the purchase of the Arrowhead property for the watershed. The next one to mention is on page 253. It's the Wicks Water Treatment Plant SCADA Phase 1 upgrade project. This is a project that currently is underway. It's a multi-year project. It's supposed to be completed by the end of December 2025 for that the SCADA services up at the treatment plant. Also on page 253 is the SCADA system phase 2 upgrade project. That too is a multi-year project. That's going to be a 3 or 4 year long project, but that is for a new SCADA system at the public works site and all of the water distribution well sites, the reservoir sites, and the sewer lift station sites. That project is a project that is being split two ways by the water distribution division and also the wastewater collection division. So it'll be being mentioned under the wastewater collection as well. The next project is on page, again, on page 253, just the VFDs for the Marks and Jordan wells. That project is for providing for new VFDs, which are vertical frequency drive pumps at the Marks and Jordan wells. We're looking at installing those to replace the existing pumps that are at those well houses. This will give us the ability to pressurize the system and be able to take the Garrison Reservoir offline. Currently, we cannot take Garrison out of service. And once we get the new wells and the reservoirs online down in the port area at the Riverside site, then we'll be able to eventually take Garrison out of service and then be able to plan for a future coating project or a painting project on the interior of that reservoir, which is long overdue. It'll be similar to what we did to the Cirrhosis Reservoir just a couple years ago. That pretty much highlights the items that I wanted to talk about on the Water Capital Reserve. Is there any questions for that fund?
Seeing none, let's continue.
Okay, so now we'll move to the Fund 55, the Wastewater Utility Fund. The first item that I wanted to mention there was on, well, actually stepping back. First thing that I wanted to mention there, so back to page 254. If you look at the very first sentence, the wastewater utility fund or wastewater fund, the second sentence there says the fund's primary source of revenue is sewer rates. So this is where I wanted to mention that the city and this budget that's being proposed tonight is actually proposed for the wastewater utility fund with a 3% utility rate increase, similar to what we just did for the water utility fund. And for that was a result of the water system master plan update. City is currently in the process of doing a wastewater facility master plan update. It's mainly focusing at the wastewater treatment plant, but this 3% increase is is kind of precipitated from discussions that we had during the water system master plan update and getting ahead of the curve. And so we're recommending, we know there's going to be some substantial projects that are going to be coming out of this wastewater facility master plan update at the wastewater treatment plant. So we're looking at, like I said, getting ahead of the curve and implementing this 3% rate increase for future projects that are going to be identified out of that master plan update. So again, the budget here before you has that 3% rate increase built into it. Okay.
And so as Dale was mentioning, the water and sewer rates that we've had have not been adjusted in quite some time. So using the information we have in the water master plan and looking forward to that projection, made this change in the proposed budget pending the wastewater master plan. If it's supported this evening, we'll still need to go back to the city council for final authorization on that rate change. Again, looking at just general cost increases year to year, 3% seemed kind of bare minimum to kind of keep pace. We'll have that conversation with council and then later on have the wastewater master plan to inform future decisions.
Thank you. So then looking at the wastewater fund, kind of the first item that I wanted to mention there is on page 271.
Good. I like that.
Under chemical lab supplies, you'll see ammonia testing at the bottom. That is something that is currently not required with the city's current NPDES permit. That's the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System permit for discharging to the river from our wastewater treatment plant. But we are in the process of doing a permit renewal that will be happening sometime in the next few months, possibly. And from that new permit, we're anticipating that we're going to be being now required to provide for ammonia testing. So that's what this is being budgeted for there. The next item is on page 273 under sewer lines. So here we are looking to transfer funds from, so that's why there's nothing here in this current budget, because the funds have been transferred to Fund 56 under the capital projects for the sewer special reserve fund for sewer line projects located within that fund. And that's going to be mainly for the, I believe it was for the First Street, another project that I'll talk about in the special reserve fund project on First Street. Page 273, stormwater improvements. Those monies there are part of the ADA project for installing of the new ADA ramps. A lot of times there's a catch basin right there on the corner of that intersection that is needing to be moved as a new ADA ramp is getting built. So that's what the funds for the ADA catch basins is for. So page 275, well, I guess that kind of finishes up the wastewater fund. Didn't have quite as much things to talk about there as we did with the water utility fund, but if there's any questions, now would be the time to ask for the water or wastewater fund.
I just have, which is probably a very basic question. And excuse me if I missed this earlier. I came in midway through your
Check your mic.
presentation. Oh,
Check to see that it's on.
there you go.
Hang on.
Okay, I just need to eat the mic. In the machinery fund on that same page, 272, I noticed that you had some costs for that, but now it's not budgeted. for this year anyways. I'm not sure if there's machinery that's no longer needed to be funded or if that was moved to another fund.
We'll see if Steve has an answer for that one.
I'm looking at it. Come sit down, Steve. Yeah. So it's a real quick answer. We purchased some stuff for the shop. We bought it, and this year, trying to save funds, and what we are buying went into a different fund.
Okay.
That's
what I thought. I just
Yep.
figured I'd double check. Thank you.
Yep, that's all it is.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to have backup support. Any other questions on that fund?
Nope, let's continue.
Okay. Now we're getting to the very last fund, or I guess we have two more, but the sewer special reserve fund. Let's see, page 275. Under transfers in, that's where monies are being transferred from Fund 55 to the sewer special reserve fund. And that's going to be for a project that's going to be being bid out this next fall. And with construction anticipating to begin late next winter or spring. And that's on First Street out by our public works shop. And we'll be installing a new sanitary sewer or upsizing and installing a new sewer main on First Street from Weber to up to about the Cherry Growers where the spur rail crosses First Street there. And that's tying into the phase one project that we did several years ago and upsizing that that main on First Street. So
Dale,
yes.
I have a really quick question.
Okay.
And I've noticed this periodically, but they were much smaller numbers. The difference between total revenues or total revenues less expenditures seems to be creeping up and down a little bit. Last year was 7.3 million. This year's 2.8 projected for 25-26. 274, sorry.
274. Let's see. See if Matthew has.
Help him out, Steve.
That's where the 5 million come in. And from mine, then it went to the sewer.
So I believe if I'm understanding correctly, we had a very large system development charge payment that
okay.
came in and then was transferred over. And so that shows that up and down.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, team.
Who was that SDC from?
Design LLC.
AKA.
Yep.
Cool.
Use the mic.
Google.
Okay, to finish this one up, page 276. Again, the SCADA system phase two project that I mentioned in the water special reserve fund for the new SCADA upgrade at Public Works is also, like I said, being budgeted for under the sewer special reserve fund too. So that's mentioned here. Again, that's going to be a multi-year project. So you'll see funding over about the next 3 years for that project as we navigate through that project. And then on page 281 is Well, that kind of finishes the sewer special reserve fund. And again, I mentioned the First Street Cherry Growers project there. So if there's no other questions on the sewer special reserve fund, I will move to the very last one, which is the sewer plant construction fund. And if no questions, then on page 281, the sewer plant construction debt service fund, you'll see at the top of the page, future wastewater treatment plant improvements. And that 5,629,246, that is building bank for future projects that are anticipated and going to be coming out of the wastewater facility master plan update that I referenced a little bit ago. Again, that project, the master plan update project is underway right now. We began that in November. It's an 18-month project, so it's anticipated to be being wrapped up about June of 2026. So with that, that's my presentation. My throat is about toast, and I will answer any other questions that anybody may have.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. McCabe?
Yes, I have one. Did Google pay a water SDC?
They did not pay a water SDC because they had credits for the all the improvements that they installed at the site. So they did pay a transportation SDC. They didn't pay a storm SDC because their storm system is all private. It was a private collection and discharge to the Columbia River. So it's their own system. Water got the credit, and then sewer was the other SDC.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're moving ahead on capital improvement funds. Who is going to be reporting on this?
I will, Chair. And what I'm going to ask the Budget Committee to do is to jump to page 295. And here, this is the Special Assessments Fund. This fund is really focused on local improvement districts and some of the other nuisance abatements and other projects that we have here. We don't have any local improvement districts in place for fiscal year 25-26. And if you will turn to page 299, right on the top there, you will see this is where we've been budgeting for our sidewalk rehab programs to assist with residential sidewalks, existing commercial and commercial redevelopment sidewalks. And that's the primary elements of this fund. Those sidewalk programs have gotten a lot of interest over the years, both in the residential and commercial sector. We do have some projects underway as we speak and hope to see more in the coming fiscal year. If I can have you turn to page 304, we're going to jump to the Capital Projects Fund. And as I mentioned last night during my presentation, this is something that we've been bringing more and more focus to, building the funds that we have here to support the different projects that we have. So right on page 305, about halfway, just a little less than halfway down, you'll see the HVAC at the library that we've talked about a number of times. And further down, you'll see a reserve for further city facility improvements at just under $3.8 million. As I mentioned, this is the fund that we're building. We're looking at a very old roof at this building. I don't think facilities has gotten to it yet, but you'll see some leaks here that we need to fix. Roofs are not cheap. We also have the library, the police department, and other facility needs, including elevators and whatnot. So we want to make sure that this is well supported and well funded. You also see we have improvements other than buildings with some additional dock maintenance, some potential improvements at the Lewis and Clark Park, and general services improvements and maintenance items. If there aren't any questions there, I'll push us to page 306. This is the special revenue summary. And this really focuses on the unemployment fund, which is where we budget for the unemployment needs citywide. We have the community benevolence fund, which supports the veteran memorials throughout the community that we have here. We have the special projects fund for different grants and infrastructure projects. The state office building fund, which covers the state office building that the city owns and then leases to the state. That's why it's gotten the name State Office Building. And then we have the Special Enterprise Reserve Fund. So to focus on a couple of these, if I can have you turn to page 318. This is the Special Grants Fund, what we call Fund 18. And I'm going to have Joshua Chandler join me up here to kind of co-present this section here. There's a number of different projects and transfers that take place. And I think if he's up for it, I'll let him take the first shot at it. You want to highlight yours?
Yeah. Good evening, committee members. Joshua Chandler. So as Matthew mentioned here, Fund 18 is our special grants fund. It's kind of a collection, if you will, of work from multiple different departments coming together, really. The first is that we have here, at least I take it actually page 313. I think that's what I'm probably going to walk through that. Some bullet points here, our goals and our focus, and this really touches on these different projects. The first is we've talked about it a long time, but this is our First Street project, which has been a project that's been in the making for many, many years. So an aspect here, you'll see two separate line items budgeted. The first is going to be one that is finishing up this engineering and planning portion of it. And then the next amount is the actual amount that is going to be for the construction of the project. I will get into those line items really quick. I just kind of wanted to run through this really quick. On the second bullet point, you'll see the city of the Dalles has entered into a new brownfield. It's not we're going to take that out. It's not a coalition grant. The coalition grant was our community-wide brownfields grant. This is a city-specific brownfield grant. So we'll just make that. It's just a typo on our end. And this is a grant that is amount of $500,000. And you'll see in here another correction. The city is expecting to have $450,000 available. So $50,000 of that is administration of this grant. So this is an EPA grant. At this point, we think we're in the clear for federal funding on this. We are working through. We have multiple projects around the community that have already been identified. I will then jump a little bit to the bottom three. Excuse me, the bottom three, the city will once again budget for a SHPO cemetery grant. We did not go for that this last year or the year before, so that will assist in the maintenance of Pioneer Cemetery. So we will be applying for those grants, two separate SHPO grants actually come next spring. The second from the bottom, the city purchased a parking lot on 3rd and Jefferson. And this is a joint development agreement with the Urban Renewal Agency. So the Urban Renewal Agency will be providing $484,000, which will be sent into Fund 18. Overall, the project is just under $1 million, and it'll be for the redevelopment of a brand new parking lot, as mentioned, at the corner of 3rd and Jefferson. And then the final something to highlight is we are once again going to pursue a transportation and growth management program grant, which is administered in partnership with ODOT and DLCD. This is for the development of what's known as the West Side Area Study, or it's the West Side Renaissance Master Plan is what we're calling it. This is an integrated land use and transportation plan, really master planning our west side of Dalles. This is an area that has aging infrastructure, substandard housing, and some fragmented pedestrian networks. There's a lot of big initiatives and community initiatives over the next few years that we're going to focus on with this grant. Some of those include, we've talked a long time about a new high school in that area, also the completion of the historic Columbia River Highway, the path, some new affordable housing programs, or a project that's being discussed next to the transit center, and also Wasco County's multi-sports ball field, as well as the potential relocation of of the hospital. So some of these big projects, and this gives us an opportunity to go forward and really kind of master plan that area. We were unsuccessful this last year. We had overwhelming support, bunch of support from stakeholders in the area. We were just due to funding, we did not receive it. Did speak to the coordinators for this grant, and they still feel very strong about this the application that we submitted. So we will be submitting that here in just the next couple months. I think that went through it. I can go down point by point if you'd like me to, but I think that's kind of the summary of those projects. And I can turn it over to Matthew to kind of cover on the, I think there's some opioid settlement funds if you wanted to touch on that, and potentially the Google technology grant.
Yep. Thank you, Josh. So we do have opioid settlement dollars budgeted here. We went through a process earlier this year with Wasco County to go through and disperse those funds through an agreement to entities like YouThink and Norcor and a few others for various projects that they're working on. The other one I wanted to highlight here was the Google Technology Grant that's going to assist in upgrading one of our conference rooms to have virtual options similar to the conference room that we have upstairs here. There's quite a bit of demand placed on those conference rooms, so having another one with the virtual option would be very helpful. And then finally, I'll end on the Federal Street Plaza, which you see on page 319 is budgeted at 4.9 million. This is where we'll be running that project. This is where the transfer from the city's general fund will be received, in addition to, again, various grants that we're pursuing and looking to secure. This is $1 million grant from the Oregon Parks and Rec Department state grant, $150,000 from Travel Oregon, $100,000 has been committed by Google for the project, and Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec has partnered in support with $5,000. And so we'll continue, and the Urban Renewal Agency has also contributed $150,000. So we'll continue to, explore and develop the capital stack for that. But if these grants come through and with the transfer from the general fund, the Federal Street Plaza should be able to move forward. And these are the projects that will be running out of Fund 18. Be happy to answer any questions on this part.
Quick question, Josh. Thanks. Fund 18, the urban renewal money, the 3.2 million was for First Street, but I missed the note on the line above that, remaining 2009 FFCO.
So these are this is the money that has already been budgeted in Fund 18 for the project. Is that?
Well, I'm asking because it says capital projects for that section was 6.7 million, 6.8 if you round up.
Yeah, so the remaining, we've been running off of this. It's 3.8, but some has been spent at it. Last year was 3.8, so some has been spent from there to go towards the engineering services agreement that we have.
Okay.
Does that answer it? Yeah.
Well, I guess the confusion on my part is that for the First Street Riverfront Connection project total, it looks like there's almost 6.8 million in that fund. And that's a mix of the 3.2 that we discussed on urban renewal plus
the remaining funds from the 2009 bond of the city of Cook County.
Sorry.
So that bond was split up in a couple of different ways. And so these are those remaining funds that have been earmarked on the city side of things for the First Street project. And then we'll be receiving the transfer from the Urban Renewal Agency and be able to run the First Street construction project through Fund 18.
Right.
As Josh mentioned a moment ago, it's a little bit less than 7 as the project has continued to move forward and developed and figuring out questions around archaeological and final design and everything like that. And so there are funds being spent. If there aren't any other questions, I will push us forward to the Special Enterprise Reserve Fund. And specifically looking at page 327. We've talked about this a little bit already in terms of the resolution that council passed informing some of the policy guidance, budgetary guidance for the enterprise zone payments and SIP dollars. So specifically, if you look at page 328, you will see that we are building up that fund under contractual services to support our master plan projects. Again, informed by the water master plan and moving forward with the wastewater master plan, we are prioritizing that core city services with water, sewer, et cetera. These generational investments that need to be made. We've made water rate increases already, and these are the funds that are going to support those master plans, which allow us to mitigate those rate increases, to not make them as high as they would need to be without the use of these funds. And so these are the funds that are paid for under the enterprise zone and SIP agreements that we have with Google. They are also supporting other projects as noted with safe routes to school, T hangars over at the airport, and others there. So this special enterprise reserve fund is where we receive those funds and how we track them. Turning to page 329, this is debt management. Just a couple notes here right at the top. You'll see that we have a rating of AA2, which is the third highest long-term credit rating. If there are specific questions about debt, I will do my best to answer them, and I will call on Angie to assist as well. But looking at city bonds and city debts, you'll see the CWS SRF and ARRA loans. I think the SDWRLF is the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, if I recall that correctly. And these have been supporting wastewater treatment plant upgrades, the Dog River Pipeline. There are some airport-related debts, a bond in 2015, which will end in 2035. A Klickitat County curb loan, or airport Klickitat County curb loan, which will be paid off in 2035 as well, I believe. Or no, I'm sorry, it was paid off in 2023. And then a curb loan also set up to be paid off in 2035. And so the way the airport has been set up is that those property rentals or property revenue that was noted during the presentation, those are first allocated to pay down these debts, and then the remainder go into airport operations. The 2009 FFCO bond is the one we just mentioned a moment ago, supporting the First Street project. And 299. Give me one moment here. Sorry, my last note here I think is irrelevant. So that's the summary on the debt service fund that we have here and the various outstanding debts that the city still has. And with that, I'll answer any questions. I kind of ran through those last few funds a little quick. We usually run through them a little quick because we're near the tail end here. And if there aren't any questions on those, I do have one final comment before turning it back over to the Budget Committee for final deliberations. One of the things that we've been working on actually just this week is a partnership that we have with Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, where the city provides financial services to that entity. And this is the reference point for this is actually way back on page 93. And we receive some revenue associated with those services we provide. Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue and their service needs are growing. They have some payroll changes that are taking place over there. And so they are likely to source financial services elsewhere going forward. And so you'll see here on page 93, we have financial services revenue. That will need to be reduced about $40,000. So I wanted to note that for the Budget Committee this evening. Again, the finance staff are here helping us keep a tally of all these changes. And once the Budget Committee has asked any remaining questions you may have or given direction to staff, we'll summarize all those changes right just before a motion to approve the amended budget. And that's how we'll end tonight or tomorrow, depending on how the discussion goes.
I have a general question.
Sure.
As I've went through this in the first place, and as we're going through it all these evenings, or these last 2 evenings, do we not need a balanced budget? Every single, not every, I think there's one that comes out even. When you look at that bar graph, and it
What
has
page are you on? I'm sorry.
any page,
Okay.
the beginning of any of these. Happen to be looking at the general fund because we just went back there. So for 2026, it shows expenses budgeted and it shows revenue budgeted. And in every case, the expenses are always budgeted way more than, most of the time, way more than the revenue. So why is that? Shouldn't they come out even?
Well,
Don't you budget what the revenue is?
So I 1 second, Angie, because I'm going to hand it right over to you. I had that same question in conversation with Angie about it, and I'm going to turn it right over to her to answer.
Okay.
I believe what you're seeing there is the budget looks a little bit different than previous years. So what you're seeing is you're seeing the revenue and then you're seeing the expenditures, but what you're not seeing on that line item is that the beginning fund balance. So we are typically every year we move our ending fund balance over to our beginning fund balance. And
Okay, well,
we are using some of our beginning fund balance for some of our expenditures that are capital projects. For example, we moved out a huge amount of the general fund revenue over into the capital project fund. We moved it over to the Federal Street Plaza. So that beginning fund revenue is part of that balanced budget for the revenue and the expenditures.
so isn't there a way to show that in this? If you're going to do this bar graph, it's very, to me, it's very misleading because it looks in every case like we're expending way more money than we're taking in. So shouldn't that ending balance that's there, the beginning balance, whatever you want to call it, shouldn't that be there also?
Angie, isn't the reason, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, the reason that it's that way is because we're lowering our rather large beginning fund balance down to a more reasonable level. You look on page 91,
Yes,
beginning fund balance is $7.8 million.
right, but it's not reflected in this bar graph. It's just the bar graph to me is very confusing.
Okay, so I
Yes.
think the bar graph is showing our revenues and it's showing our expenditures. And beginning fund balance is not a revenue source. Our beginning fund balance is what we're carrying over from the previous year. The revenues is what we are anticipating to be receiving in the budget year of 25-26. And the expenditures are what we are anticipating on spending in 25-26. And so ultimately, yes, you are correct. We are supposed to have a balanced budget, in which we do have a balanced budget, but some of those expenditures are being used by the beginning fund balance, which is okay because they are capital projects, they're one-time expenses, they're not reoccurring expenses. If we put the beginning fund balance in there with that, that would be showing funds that aren't really actually revenue that's not actually there for that year.
I get that. It just looks really strange to me.
You know, I keep hearing that we have new software and that all of the software has glitches. And this may be one of those glitches where it doesn't reflect accurately the balance sheet, right? Angie, is that possibly true?
No, actually, it's not true because the revenue is our revenue that we're actually anticipating on receiving for the year, and the expenditures are the expenditures that we're anticipating on spending. Beginning fund balance is not part of our revenue source for the year. That is a carryover from the previous year, and that money can be used for the expenditures if they're one-time capital improvement projects. We can be using it for that. I do see and understand what you're seeing, but it is factual.
So
Can I make a comment? To the extent that this graph is intended to inform and instruct us, I mean, I'm assuming the public and the people on this board, to see that somehow reflected in this chart. For instance, could you have a pink section that is, the beginning fund balance, and that would, in the end, show a balanced budget in a graph form, just as informative.
That is a great idea. That is something definitely that I think the finance department can look into and see if there's a possibility. Unfortunately, this is our first year, so I absolutely love the idea of people giving, their ideas and things to make it the budget better every year. In a few years from now, we'll have everything in there that we wanted, just like we had on the old budget. So I think that that is something that they can definitely write down. If it's not something they currently do, maybe they can put that into, the productivity of getting it created for the next year.
Even a one-liner explanation that carryover budget dollars are not reflected in revenues for the forecasted revenues for the coming year. Just a simple line would
And-
solve it.
And
That's
correct me
a
if-
great idea.
correct me if I'm wrong, Angie, but at the same time, this graph is important to show that we are spending down the beginning fund balance, and that is something you should be aware of. And so I don't want to make this graph, I don't want to change this graph too much to not show that aspect of it. That's an important aspect to show and how we're using those funds.
That's why I would suggest just a comment showing that those carryover revenues are not included in the graph.
Sorry, I'm going to throw my 2 cents in, but including it on the graph over time would show in graphical form a decreasing beginning fund balance, right? It would show what you're doing and how those 3 chunks of money interact.
True, like a line graph.
Yeah.
To the extent that the budget is including those 3 things, right? Expenses, revenue, and the carryover, then those should be reflected in some way in that bar graph. That's all I would say.
Gotcha.
So
And that's a
Any
great idea,
comments?
and that's something that we can look into. I believe that finance can try to see if they can get that implemented for the final budget book possibly, but if not, definitely for next year.
And if we're making comments about the software, I don't like it. And we know that you're going to change the subsidiary things into blue like we had before. But when you look at page 140, for example, the circle graph or whatever you call those graphs, there's a page and a half of colors. And you cannot tell what's in that circle. It's kind of useless. I don't really know why we even have that in here. It's
We also
see it on the computer. If I get my iPad out, I can spread it with my fingers, but you can't see all those colors in here and they're too close together. I just think it's a really strange way to show that information.
No, that's a good point. We also had that discussion point, as you can see the percentage share of that pie chart there. Anything under 10%, for example, we may work with to see if that's something we could leave off. That would make it a little bit more clear.
I did find something interesting, which is on my desktop. When I scroll over any of the graphs, anything's colored, it popped out on each one, so it like highlighted them out. It's not working that way on my laptop. And so depending on maybe the service you're using, the whatever the software doesn't function the same way. And so it was really nice when I was looking at it because I was like, oh, and that pops out. You would scroll over yellow and it would pop out whatever yellow was, and you could see what the slice was for that particular tone of yellow. So I don't know if that's something that can be addressed or if it just works with some systems and it doesn't work with others.
So I think what that is that when you guys were given the budget book, you were giving a PDF document of the budget book, and then like online, it's the ClearGov online portion of the budget book that you can actually be able to see that.
Oh.
So on the final document that'll be posted on the website, it will be that item along with us being able to quarterly do reports to say where we are at on the budget. We'll be able to that will be able to be posted onto the website too. So there's some huge benefits that the city will benefit from this. So you guys can actually mid-year get online, look to see exactly where we're at in the budget by graphs of where we're at on saving for capital projects, where we're at on spending for capital projects. So there are some huge highlights to it. I think there's just some quirks of working through it and, getting the graphs that not everybody's going to be happy with the same graphs. It's just impossible to make everybody happy. But I think there's going to be, as you guys work through the next couple of years, of finding something that the majority of everybody can be happy with.
And change is always hard.
It is. It is.
Chair, may I suggest that these are the kind of comments that members of the committee could send in to finance and the city manager after we've completed what we're really here for, as far as how it looks and how the graphs are and that sort of thing. All those suggestions are appreciated, but now is not really that time.
But we also need to end the public testimony. So, yes, I'll have a portion right here because does anyone wish to testify in support of, in opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the proposed budget? Would you come forward, please? Just identify yourself.
Thank you. I'm Susan Buse. I'm the museum registrar at the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center. And I would like to address the Tourism Promotion Fund. We applied for a grant for $10,000, $10,933, and the recommended amount came back for $6,000. I wanted to just kind of fill you in a little bit on why I would ask you to reconsider that recommended amount and fund us for the entire amount. It is a tourism-related grant, and our photos have certainly appeared in tourism articles, in national magazines, and in newspapers. The day I applied for the grant, I got a request from the Oregonian travel feature writer who was looking for historic photos of the Dalles Iron Works and the Baldwin Saloon, and I was able to provide her with those. But I also wanted to let you know that tourism is, there's a ripple effect with the photos into other facets of tourism, not just print. When the MKM Hotels, who purchased the Shiloh Inn, was in the middle of doing their remodeling, they were looking for historic photos that they wanted to keep displayed in the lobby to encourage the visitors at their hotel to come into town and visit those venues that they had seen historic photos of. So they have done that. They've got a beautiful display as you first walk in, and they got those photos from us. I wanted to remind you that who do you think Wall Dogs came to when they were looking for historic photos of the downtown area and the people? I probably provided 40 to 50 photos to Wall Dogs when they were doing their big mural fest there. I've had urban development come through and landmarks as they're doing research, and their goals are to improve tourism, but I'm giving them some background support for historically what the landmarks looked like. We also have had requests from schools, archaeological sites, genealogy researchers who plan their tourism to come through and look at our town after they get the photos from us. The developer I've been working with tells me that once we get our website, photo website back up and running again, that he believes we can leverage the architecture to work with other databases that we've got. One of the ones I'm really interested in getting online again, not only our photo database, we've got over 29,400 photos in our photo database, but we also have an Oregon Trail inscription database of over 5,112 photos that were taken of the inscriptions all along the Oregon Trail. This was an 8-year grant from done by Jim Henderson out of White Salmon, and he used a specialized cross-polarization photography technique to be able to pick up really faint inscriptions and inscriptions made with tar or with axle grease. He got access to get on private property where the general tourist isn't allowed to go. But this is a really important piece of history, these Oregon Trail inscriptions. He wants us to get those online. And it is something that if we can get those online, we are the only museum in the world that has this database and these photos that he took. He did it under an umbrella program with the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service. They buried that grant under something else. Nobody there can figure out where it came from or what happened to it. And so he gave us the database and the photos to work with so that we can get those and make those available to the public. And that's something that we can leverage if we get our photo archives back online, but we really need that full grant amount. The 25 user license, which was said, indicated being something that wasn't considered for funding, is specific to this particular program. We already have a FileMaker license internally for staff, but this is something that would allow us to interact with the web browsing public and give us sufficient access for web browsers and web users to use. And, we're looking for a jump start on this. Once we get the photo archives back on, it becomes revenue producing, and it's not going to be a problem to fund these licenses in years past. But we're a 30-year-old museum, and we've been struggling with HVAC issues over the last couple of years. I'm sure you guys know what that's like. And so the amount of spare change available for programs like this has just not been available to me. And the stars are aligning. I've got a developer ready to jump on this. He thinks he can have results in a few weeks. And I would love to see us get that going again. But I really need that full amount.
Thank you, Susan. The amount again was?
The amount I asked for was $10,933. The amount that was recommended was $6,000, and that's just $67 short of a cut of $5,000 out of that initial grant request, and it may make all the difference in the world on whether I can get these photos going or not.
Understood.
Can I ask, it says it called those extra things ongoing costs, the new domain licensing, SSL certification and hosting. Those are not ongoing costs. Those are specific to this project. Is that correct?
The costs would be ongoing in the sense that we'd have to renew them again after a year. But I believe that after we get this up and running again, that's not going to be a problem. We aren't going to find ourselves in a situation where we can't maintain it. So
Well, these are just initial costs.
it's the initial cost to get us back up and running again, yes.
So we have a request to consider increasing the award amount by approximately $5,000. Is there any discussion on this? I know we have some revenues that we could make an adjustment.
I can confirm that those sort of upkeep costs are quite low. Just SSL certificates, and that's like maintenance. Worst case scenario, you might pay $1,000 for 5 years. So as far as costs that the library, or not the library, that the Discovery Center would be able to cover, I can at least confirm that it's not going to be a large overhead.
Do we have any other discussion?
I was just going to confirm that in the present situation we find ourselves in, there's a lot of arts and culture grants that are not going to be coming available for projects. And so I know that it will be difficult to find that $5,000 elsewhere in the next coming time. So I would be inclined to support this.
So we have a decision to make. Yes.
I would also be in favor. I've personally scrolled through for hours those photo archives, and they are tremendously interesting and fascinating. And I think it's a small amount to be asking for the full request.
Is this a motion or is this just a consensus?
I guess what my recommendation would be is you would talk about all these different changes and whatnot. I'll keep notes up here on
Yes.
what kind of the consensus is, and then at the end of it, I'll run through it all. And then you can make the motion you choose as amended based
Perfect.
on my summary.
Thank you very much, Susan. Let's continue by asking, is there anyone else that would like to speak to the Budget Committee? Any other requests? Come forward. We need it on the mic.
Carolyn Wood,
Yes.
1709 Liberty Way. As a board member of the Discovery Center, I have to say I totally support Susan's request. And this is a issue we've been hoping to get repaired and back on. So I just want to say I support it completely.
All right. Anything else?
Can the budget committee ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew, would you please speak to the spending down of the beginning fund balance for just a minute? You said that's a big policy decision, and I would like to hear sort of the context and the thinking behind that.
Certainly. So the spending down, if you will, of the beginning fund balance aligned with some of the discussions we've been having to support those capital improvement needs that we have here. And to, rather than having funds sitting in that beginning fund balance growing, we can allocate those and shift those over to those specific needs, for example. We can shift those as we need to. So this year we shifted over 1.5 million into the capital improvement fund as part of that. As we grow that fund and better inform the capital improvement plans that we have, I would expect to have a 5, 10, 15-year guesstimate of how much we would need in that fund. And then we can better dial in what those transfers may look like. This flat 1.5 million is kind of what we can do, anticipating that there's some deferred maintenance that we need to catch up on. The roofs, the elevators, for example, which all add up really quick. An elevator probably goes for $250,000. Roofs, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. And so transferring over 1.5, I think is a good amount to prepare for those expenses. So having those resources available over there and to build them and to allocate them for that purpose seems to make good budget sense and preparing for those expenses. Does that help answer your question?
That's perfect. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that I've talked with Matthew about our fund balance issues at the beginning of the year. And I think once you get over 20% of your operating expenses, I think it's pretty high. And investing part of our fund balance in capital costs, like Angie was saying too, not operating, but capital costs is very prudent to get that fund balance down to where it should be.
And I really like this question and conversation piece. The city clerk just reminded me though that we're in public testimony, so it may be good to complete that and then we can have the back and forth.
That is true.
question. So,
And we'll come
thank you.
back in
Thank you,
the, when we conclude this portion. Any other input from the public? Okay, I think I have something that I need to read, which I do.
Oh,
Yes, please.
if we're off the public comment, I just had one other question. We got to the public comment before I had a chance to ask it.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yep. Okay.
There we go.
Let's do that.
So the public portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the committee feel it has enough information to make a decision? If so, I will entertain a motion, but we need to go open. Let me close it first, which I just did. And now we have a portion to discuss.
And this is more of a future foresight plan that the city has. I was looking over the bonds and debts that we have, and it looks like we're paying them down and there's a little increase, but it looks like we're trending back down. Do we have a long-term plan as far as when we're going to have those paid down? I know there might be bonds that come up from time to time, but is there like a strategic plan long-term to try to get those debts even further down?
Well, so certainly some of the debt that we have is set to retire at certain time periods. I think a couple of those in particular are set to expire in 2035, for example. However, maybe what I'll do is take this opportunity to really work off the water master plan that we identified and the direction we're headed, which is to take on more debt. And so we've looked at different financing sources, one of which is, we're starting to, I should say, one of them is WIFIA, which I cannot remember the acronym off the cuff. Water Finance Authority. It ends in authority.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a federal program identified in the Water Master Plan called WIFIA that supports or is a funding path that cities use to fund these generational level projects. And so for the Water Master Plan in particular, when we talk about, kind of call it the big three, which was replacing the Wicks water treatment plant, raising the Crow Creek Dam, and replacing the transmission lines, our future involves more debt. And so that's where we're adjusting and making these rate changes to help service that debt as we fund these generational projects, and are allocating some of these SIP revenues, like I mentioned, to further support that with mitigating those rate increases. So I hope that kind of answers your question that, we're looking at paying off the debt that we have, and we'll certainly move forward on those different amortization schedules and debt payment schedules that we have. But we're likely going to be taking more debt out in the future to finance these projects.
And so it's going to be growing before it then drops again, hopefully.
I would probably anticipate it'll grow faster than it drops in the relatively reasonable future.
Thank you, Matthew.
Right. Well, Matthew, I'm looking at this general fund list, and this is a portion where we can take a look at some of these requests that weren't met. For example, you think yeah, I'm in this handout. This is off from the Discovery Center request, and that's where I see that they had requested Discovery Center. Oh, here it is, 10,933, and they were awarded 6,000. So there's a deficit there of what? 4,933.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so there's one. Now you think had a request for 30,000 and they were given a recommended 25,000, correct?
Correct.
So there's a $5,000 difference there. Is there anything else glaring in this request that maybe we could fill some of those? Is that a possibility?
That is the Budget Committee's prerogative.
Right.
I think one of the things I'll mention in this City Council budget is there's a substantial amount of funding here already for other agencies and nonprofits and supporting those efforts. We want to be very, very mindful of how we do that. As I've mentioned, some process improvement is needed through this application process that we have moving forward. It's the Budget Committee's prerogative, though. If you want to see something funded or you want to fund something at a higher level, staff can work to see where those resources can come from. We can lower the ending fund balance that we have. We could not fund something else as high. That's that discussion that the Budget Committee can have. And so if you'd like, I can go through this sheet and kind of highlight some of the pieces again, if you'd like.
Not certain, because there's no one here to represent, but Susan was here to represent the Discovery Center, and she made a request. Now, I think it's recommended that we discuss it and come up to either a request or a approval or denial of her request.
That's one element here. And so I'd be looking for consensus from the Budget Committee
Correct.
to add that to my summary sheet or not. And then I can read down the whole list of budget changes, as I mentioned a moment ago before the motion.
Yes.
Can I just ask you, as the facilitator of the process that we've gone through, I'm just considering from the point of view of someone who's asked, or who's made a request and may not get their request filled. For instance, the Little Music City, and it says should go to the tourism services contractor. I'm assuming that you would communicate that to the grantee potential grantee.
Correct. So
And-
we sent notices to,
Okay.
we sent an email to everybody ahead of this budget
With
meeting.
this information?
It may have included this information. I'm not sure. I'll double check,
Okay.
but we intend to send notices after this meeting as well.
Okay.
And in this document that you have, that was one of my objectives, was not simply to say no, frankly, but to try and point to another resource or another opportunity that could assist.
So in terms of planning for a project or budgeting or something like that, a lot of people will hope that they get the grant that they applied for. And so if you go back to, say, Little Music City and you say, well, go talk to the Dalles Chamber. Do you know, does the Dalles Chamber have funds available for them, a grant that will close next month or in 6 months? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we would be feeding them on to another funding source, which then says, sorry, we don't have funds for you. So my only thought is that to the extent that we haven't established really the rules and the frame around which we judge these things, it's really just the information that you've given us and the feedback you've given us. I mean, I would be inclined to err in favor of granting some of these requests, just for that reason, that we don't have the rules. We are just here to make our own judgments. And if we say no, they may not get that funding from the other funding source that is potentially available, but we don't know, unless you know, that the Dalles Chamber would entertain any of these. You know what I mean? Like you're sending them on to someone that will be able to support them.
Yeah, so I have a couple comments there. So, currently the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce is the contractor for the city of the Dalles when it comes to the tourism promotion contract we have. And I do know that they have a grant program that makes awards to different agencies to help with promotion and advertising. I don't know where they're at in their funding cycle. I don't know how much funds are left available. I'm trying to be helpful with that recommendation, but I'm not going to do all the work for them, just to be frank. And I hear where you're coming from, that we want to support, all these initiatives are good and great in their different ways and contributing to the community. I also may just say that, first and foremost, the Dalles is not a granting agency. The city is not a granting agency. And we do have this program that's evolved over time to support our partners. And I think that's really wonderful. But I also think we're not and maybe shouldn't be the first choice as a funding request for many of these different concepts, and that some of these other potential sources that could help them should be the primary place that they're going first before coming to the city.
Yes, please. You have a question? Oh, anyone else? Anyone have a comment, question? We're still discussing this item. Looks like you do. Dan.
Give me a moment to put my thoughts together.
Right.
All right. So during our annual goal setting session, my chair,
Yes.
I said, we're going to have to answer this question. And I asked the council to set a dollar amount and some guidelines. And you guys said, no, well, let's see what happens. And here's what happens. We have many requests, and we have not given our staff guidelines for the sort of things that we want to fund. And we're not going to do that off the cuff, or I wouldn't recommend us doing it off the cuff. This is something we need to do with staff and a certain amount of time to think about what is it that we want to fund. I don't have a great recommendation for this evening, except I don't know how much appetite I have for going through each one and second guessing the recommendations, but it is something we need to take up. And we don't want to find ourselves in this situation every year saying, we've got a lot of money, we'll spend it, put in a grant request, and good luck. I feel like we need to put some clearer guidelines for next year's budget.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would second that. I mean, to the extent that this has been presented to us and we have to sort of make a decision about it, it makes it like you don't want to say no, which is always what happens, is you don't want to have to say no. And so I second the idea of having a dollar amount set for it. And so that limits you. And you just have to then say, we only have so much money to spend, and we had to make some tough choices, as opposed to, well, we technically have some money we could be spending, but we decided not to do it. Do you know what I'm saying? We decided not to fund you anyway for some other reason. So I would like I would like a frame around it that's pretty straightforward for us to work with. Presuming I come back next year.
Rod?
To that end, you mentioned you had a list of things that would actually help with that decision. And didn't you have a list of things that have come up during the 2 days of discussions going through the budget that you wanted to go down, which might answer a question about funding?
But potentially, with the finance staff assistants here, who have been taking good notes both tonight and yesterday.
I'd like to hear that.
Summary
That
of
might be helpful.
Budget changes that might be helpful. This is a recap. I'm happy to read it now if the group would like. I intended that this summary would capture all of the changes to the budget to help with your motion language, but I can read it now and we can keep tweaking it and then.
Well, we've passed the 8 o'clock mark, and I need to stop and ask, do we want to continue and finish this up tonight? And the consensus is everyone, yes. So yes, we do have that consensus. So we'll extend on. So yes, we need to hear that conclusion.
Can I just, there's a difference between changes to the budget because maybe you caught something and parking lot, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So are those parking lot issues, or are those just changes that you mentioned to us during the course of going through this budget for 2 nights?
These were the changes mentioned to you during the course of the last 2 nights.
Okay. Do we really need to review those?
I don't know, but I'm just looking at that parking lot number and, we have a request and we have some money that's in excess. So
we don't really have that.
Yeah, we got 2 parking lot items. To my mind, we got this and we've got Susan's request.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Yeah. So the judicial construction services, not construction services, judicial contractual services was presented during the finance department. And that was something that staff is recommending that we remove from the budget.
How much was that?
There, $20,000. There was a comment that we should reserve 5 in that line item. So that is one parking lot discussion item on what your direction is there. The second one, and we can go ahead and write it up there, actually, it would be the Discovery Center, additional 4933.
4933 is right.
And wasn't there a $30,000, which should be on your list, that was taken out of one of these many?
The 9th and
budgets?
Clark Street project. It had
There's a whole plethora of them, and so I'd be happy to read them if you'd like.
Let's
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
and then put them on the, if it's
Well, they
appropriate.
don't belong there.
Oh, okay. No, okay. Just read.
it's $20,000 removed for the unmanned aerial vehicle presented during the police department's budget. Judicial budget, contractual services, removing 20,000. That is what's up on the parking lot right there. The HR budget, 18,536 additional and personnel. Economic development budget, 6,532 additional for personnel services. In the police department budget, we need to add a total of $332,172, and that is for the CAD RMS project that we went through. And so that's the 911 operations contribution. That's the CAD RMS upgrade project in partnership with Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue and Wasco County. Data conversion, hosting upgrade costs, and some of those change orders. So that was detailed in the police department budget. That is a big one. Police filming of department records had a typo, and so it was budgeted at $16,885, and it should be $1,600 flat. $32,000 additional transfer from the special grants fund to the Public Works Transportation System Reserve Fund. Those are those ARPA dollars we mentioned just earlier tonight in support of the 12th Street project. We did have a 9th and Clark duplication, and so we'll be removing $30,000 from that fund for the typo there. The Brownfield grant and Fund 18, as noted, it should be budgeted at $500,000, with $50,000 going to admin and $450 in reserve. And then we'll be removing the revenue from financial services, contract for financial services with Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue in the amount of $40,000 from the general fund. So those are the budget amendments that staff has submitted that you would include in your motion, move to approve and recommend adoption of the budget as amended. That's the list to date, or list to the minute. And so if you have other changes that you'd like to see, we can throw them up on the parking lot, or I can add them to the list here.
What's the net on that list? I'm sorry.
Question. That's okay. You go.
Do the math.
I mean, it's going to be plus. It's going to be plus
Now
something,
add up to
right?
332,000
No,
that the police department needs.
that's one big item.
Right.
Plus
But-
all these others. Yeah.
Right. But all of those pluses and minuses don't equal the 332,000 that the police department needs.
No,
So
they,
where does that come from?
they absolutely do not. We'd have to reduce the ending fund balance to make that work out.
That's all it is the ending fund balance.
Correct. And
Then
Or add
or find
we
find
can spend more money.
revenues. So if you'll turn to the police department budget for the CAD RMS specifically, because I know that's a big one. We're on page 142.
Oh,
Okay.
As we noted during the presentation, when we were putting together the budget, we take our best guess with what we know, with the information we have at the time, and we budgeted $632,000 for the CAD RMS project. The total cost for that project with the data conversion, the hosting upgrades needed for the new software, and the final negotiations with that software, the total is 963,940.
Right. So my main point, when I wanted to go to that, was to, before we went down a rabbit hole with all this other, to find this extra money, we needed to know where we're at there. That is separate. Now we can look at that grease board over there and have some semblance of the ability to fill that request. And one of the things that I always put into the fact of helping with a request or not is, did they show up?
right.
And we have one who showed up, who the Discovery Center does so much out there for this community, aside from this particular issue, that, I'm inclined to go find some money on that grease board.
And what they're doing is not just for us, and it's
No.
not just for them.
It is tourism at,
Super useful.
yeah, at a high degree.
Yeah, I think it's too bad that, I mean, these people who got these partial funds, if they had come and had a reason to tell us that they needed, why they needed it. But they didn't, so.
I agree with both of you and it matters.
Well, to be fair, there were people here last night and they left thinking that
It was a done.
there was
deal.
no questions, there was no issue, so they probably figure they're going to get the money.
Nothing was brought up to us.
Well, there's only so much you can do and we have to make our decision. So
Are we all in consensus that we did want to fund the Discovery Center then? I think that's
I
all.
didn't see anyone nodding no, but I asked, do we need a motion on that or do we need a consensus? And do we do the request to submit $4,933?
So what I don't want to do is a bunch of motions for each individual budget change. If that's the will of the committee, I'll add it to my list here
Yeah.
that I just read, and those will be the comprehensive changes. We'll move to approve the budget and recommend its adoption as amended, and those amendments will include everything you've kind of built to consensus.
I didn't see anyone. I'd say it's unanimous on the budget to fund the Discovery Center request.
And actually, Mr. Mays, I just looked through all of these to see what the reasons were, why they were denied or why they didn't get fully funded. And I would be happy to follow through with some of them, except I don't know the background because it's a shame that they're not here, but they're not here.
Well, I would have suggested last night might have been the time to ask them.
We didn't know at the time,
Didn't get to that.
and we didn't have a request by the Discovery by Susan.
Who also was here last night. And this may not be the time or the place, but I really appreciate the acronyms. And actually, the way you guys did this, it's probably better than just having an addendum to the whole, because they're all in alphabetical order, but Anyway, it
also
was
found-
really helpful.
We also found you left off RFB, right? Rapid flashing beacons. Okay.
Oh, Matthew, do you have a total for us?
Rich knows exactly who was here yesterday on this list. He's going to talk to us about the stuff. So should we consider
Sure.
who was here from his list? And talk about it real
Sure.
quick,
Well,
see if it's fair enough.
We're open for discussion. That's what we're doing.
We didn't want to come back a second night either, you know.
So
There's some people here I didn't know, but I do know that well, Susan was here from the Discovery Center last night,
right.
and Scott Baker was here from the Park District. The executive director of Main Street was here. And there was people here about the mural restoration. That's a Main Street program, technically, I guess. Carolyn is here for that. So I do know those people were here, plus others who I don't know who they represented.
But there are some people on this list that didn't make the cut, not recommended for funding. And then of those, we don't know, oh, I see, requested 50,000 and only Wasco County Kramer Field were allocated 19,440. So there's a deficit there. All of these, I don't know if we have enough money to support all of the requests.
Well, I remember a few years ago, we had a rule that said if we were adding anything to the budget, we had to either increase the revenue to pay for it or decrease in expenditure to make it balance. Now, we haven't talked about that, but that used to be a kind of a rule.
If you remember, I think it was last year or the year before, 2 years maybe, where we were around and every one of the departments, said, well, I can cut that and I can cut that. So we could negotiate and we could add we moved some funds to make it work. That's what we did at the end.
Certainly that can be part of the process. I would, and just as the city manager, I would be reluctant to, decrease funds for city departments and city operations for outside funding requests.
You didn't, but they came up and said, well, we don't need that extra car right now. We can, that's how they came back.
There was a specific, sorry to interrupt, Chair, but we had, if I recall, it was actually a specific request within the city budget for animal control. So it wasn't
City fund to city fund.
It was within a department.
Right, one department to another department.
Right.
Not
So
an outside
said
funding
we
request.
really wanted to fund that. We found some money.
Departments found the money.
Right. We did some conversation and squeezed the dollars out to do
Yes.
this. Yeah. But it wasn't for a sort of a third party, if you will.
It was internal, yes.
Yeah.
And if I may draw the committee's attention back to this graphic that we've handed out, because this, there's not a defined budget that we advertised for this grant process, as Councilor Richardson noted. But when we looked at the transient lodging tax, and again, on the left-hand side, you'll see the Tourism Promotion Fund receives all of the transient lodging tax money that we hope to receive in this upcoming year. And we keep 55.4% of that specifically because it's restricted to tourism-related purposes.
Right.
And then we transferred 44.6% of that, which is $649,988, which is what is in the city council's budget. So that has a connection that the committee might find helpful, in that there's not an unending source of revenue and an ending source of resources to pay for different requests such as this. And so what I did here, part of the calculation here was to look at those revenue streams, what was transferred into the general fund, and try and keep it within that ballpark. And that also was influenced by shifts from the general fund into the tourism promotion fund, for example, for city expenses such as host compliance and the AutoCast app and others. And so we tried to keep it level. We tried to keep it flat with what we've been receiving from transient lodging tax dollars and how that's broken up into tourism and then general fund. And so if you turn to page 97, you'll see in your city council budget, 649-988.
I see the logic in what you've done, and I agree with everything you've done. It's just that we don't have sufficient monies to be able to answer everyone's request. There's just too many coming in on this particular fund. There was a time when city council had a finite amount, and we had to sit down. This is when Carol and I were here, and we would have 50,000 or 100,000. It was terrible. And then I know.
Yeah.
So then it just expanded, and now it's up at 649,000.
Well, that's a dramatic increase from, if you look from previous years, and it's a policy shift, right? To move some dollars in.
And a big chunk of that are the funds under the prior TLT ordinance that went directly to Parks and Rec in a different line item, different way.
Yeah.
And now are being accounted for both through the IFA that we have with Parks and Rec and the county for water services, and in the funding amounts for their other needs based on the application that they submitted. And so again, Wasco County is supporting phase one of their fence project, and with Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec, in my opinion, more in support of a partner during a transition year, but disagreeing to a certain extent that parks in general are tourism facilities and needing to focus on, what these monies are really supporting and what they're going towards.
For me, it would help to have a mission vision statement for this project, so that you sort of have a guiding principle in your head when you're evaluating these. And I'm sure that you sort of do based on where the dollars are coming from or whatever. But in terms of what the mission and vision and guiding principles are for making those decisions. And maybe if I didn't read the application, I didn't read the instructions that you might have given to the grant applicants. Maybe that information is sort of in there, but that would be something I think the city council would behoove the city council to really establish that the frame, not just the amount of money or where the dollars are coming from, but what is the guiding principle? How are we instructed to judge these things? That's hard for me to do. I mean, for me, it's a good thing. Why don't we go ahead and give them some money? Sounds good enough to me. But there are a lot of principles involved in giving grants. I've read a lot and evaluated a lot of grants, and so I know how to kind of think through this process. And I really don't feel like I have kind of the guidance to judge. I have been doing this for a few years, and so I do remember the time when it was just sort of, well, here's something that's good, and let's just give them some money. And there wasn't really anything other than somebody had heard about something or somebody asked for some money and then presented it to the committee, and then the committee said, well, could we or couldn't we? And so the idea that you're creating a structure around this is great. It's evolving now, and I would just say, for next time, to really give us one sheet on the guiding principle according to the city council,
Yeah, so a couple comments there. One of the things we did use is the city council, the city's mission, the city council's goal and action plan document, and the community's vision action plan. It doesn't always fit with what we get asked for because it's pretty general. And to your point, that process improvement, I mean, if it's council's, interest and direction, and this is for another time, about establishing a review committee if we're really going to spin up a granting program with particular criteria and a particular pot of money, a review committee who really kind of digs into that, not at a budget meeting. That may be a way to go and kind of develop such a program if such a program is desired. Again, primary, thinking of the city's core mission and core services that we have, we're not a foundation, we're not a granting entity. But we do try and support our community, and we do try and support our partners. Some of the other criteria that we use in the application, for example, one very simple one, not for operational costs. Like, we're not going to pay your rent, we're not going to pay power and water bills and things of that nature, power bills and whatnot. And so we did have some of that criteria there to guide it. But again, it's an evolving program.
And those comments were in your summary sheet that, you know, it was ongoing expenses and we're not.
Yeah, I really tried to capture those. Now, I mean, one thing we actually debated a little bit is I do have, you know, a document with all the applications and all the relevant information. You know, it's 163 pages long. And so in addition to the budget book, I tried to summarize it for you guys in my 2-pager there. But that could be something that a review committee, again, if council so desired, could really dig into that.
Yes, anyone? Other comments?
Maybe you could put in the grant application that if you're denied or you didn't get your full amount that you were asking for, that you should be sure and come to the budget meetings.
I'm going to
And-
oppose that idea. We've got a long enough sessions. No, we've got a
What I will
long
make-
enough session.
What I will make comment on that is, you know, I had a lot of people ask me, should I come to the budget meeting, et cetera, et cetera. And I always say yes, if you submitted a request. It's hard for me. Then they say, well, what time should I be there? And it's really hard for me to give that time. And so as the mayor noted a moment ago, we did have quite a few people in the audience yesterday. We did present the city council budget, and there was, you know, that kind of engagement and discussion about these topic points. They're not here this evening, probably because the ones that were recommended felt that they were probably secure. But others who were not funded or not recommended for funding, such as the Discovery Center or partial funding, did come back. And so, again, I think that's a part of the process to improve, and why making, you know, grant funding to sort of decisions at a budget meeting maybe isn't the best part of that process.
Well,
Can you tell us what Wasco County IFA is, please?
The Wasco County IFA is the intergovernmental funding agreement associated with Wasco County's Kramer Field water costs, similar to Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec IFA. For the rest of the parks that they own, which include City Park and do not include the Lewis and Clark Festival Park. I had to sling it out there. Just
To brag about your information.
not really.
but it seems like the structure that you've come up with, this is workable. We just have to tweak it and come up like it's in development. And we're kind of caught tonight because of the request. Where do we go from here? How do we fill this request or deny it from?
What I saw is that there seemed to be general support to fund the full Discovery Center request. So I will add that to my summary list here. The list that I reviewed a moment ago, and thank you for putting it together for me. Those changes, including CAT RMS with the police department budget and everything, is a net increase of 266,888 to the general fund. So that's taking everything that we removed and added from Fund 18, an increase of $43,000. Fund 13, an increase of $32,000, and Fund 53, a reduction of 30, which is the 9th and Clark duplicate that we mentioned.
Right.
And so overall, it certainly is an increase in the budget and budget expenditure.
Where do we get the funds to cover that?
So primarily for the biggest increase in the general fund, and Angie, please catch me if I'm wrong here, for the CAT RMS project, especially for this first year on, you know, the higher costs with onboarding that software, we would reduce the ending fund balance. And that is on page, hold on one second.
And our ending fund balance is?
$1,200,000, so.
So we're looking on page 88, I believe. And I believe it's about halfway down. Our ending fund balance is 3.73.
Ending fund revenue.
There are sufficient funds.
There are sufficient
There are
funds.
sufficient funds to support those
Meet
changes.
the request with an amendment to our final recommendation.
With all the amendments that I covered there, in
Correct.
particular, the biggest one, like I mentioned, with the general fund,
Correct.
there are sufficient funds there.
You've also got a contingency of $1,200,000. You want to play with that?
Shh.
That's the prerogative there. I think, and you may have missed the answer to your question last night, right in the beginning, looking at how we calculate that contingency and the guiding philosophy that we have around 10%. You know, the contingency does not include some of those transfers out, those capital transfers and other payments that we make. And so I think we're actually just under 10%. And so we round it up. So I wouldn't recommend messing with the contingency at this point.
If you had told me that last night, I wouldn't have said that.
Well,
So it sounds like we have, by taking out of the contingency,
ending fund balance.
ending
Ending
fund
fund.
balance, excuse me. But the ending fund balance, so we have sufficient funds to meet the needs of the requests plus the things that you have put on your list
Correct.
with an amendment to the final recommendation to pass the budget
You would move to, well, you have your language here, right? Yeah.
as amended, yes. So do we have any other issues to discuss? Anyone? So we're at the point, right? Where we need to get a motion. All right,
I'm going to make a motion that we move to approve the minutes of the May 6th.
no,
Second page.
Second.
Yeah.
so that's
Thank you.
minutes.
Apologies.
Um,
Move to approve the proposed budget and recommend its adoption to the city as amended.
I think that's appropriate, right? Yeah, I got the nod. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a second with Councilor Runyon. Any other further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion passes.
I just want to thank you all again for volunteering to serve. This is the second night and it's a very, very long night. Appreciate the city council's service and all of the volunteers as well and the budget committee. It's great to see you guys. And I just want to thank all the staff who have also endured these budget meetings tonight. Thank you all for being here this evening. Again, really appreciate the support from the finance department, especially with Angie. Even though we've had this transition, she's still with us here, helping us out. I really appreciate that. And also Nick and Lisa right there in the front row, the public works staff, you know, working through a lot of different transitions as well. And all the city staff that we have here. I feel really lucky to be part of this organization and work alongside them. Thank you.
You know, and I also said at a council meeting after we did some ordinance updates, this is the way government should work. This is the way government should operate.